The desert sun was killing him slowly, mercilessly. Elias Crowley had perhaps an hour left to live when he saw her silhouette against the white-hot sky. Through cracked, swollen lips, he tried to call out, but no sound came. His throat was sandpaper and blood. Then cool water touched his mouth, and gentle hands cradled his head. "I've got you," a woman's voice said. "Stay with me, cowboy." In that moment, dying beneath the Nevada sun, Elias Crowley found the one person who refused to let him become just another skeleton in the sand. This is the story of how a stranger's mercy became love, how a drifter found home, and how one ranch became worth fighting for. Stay with me until the end, and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The heat had stopped being uncomfortable around noon. By 2 hours, it had become dangerous. By 4, it was simply killing him. Elias Crowley lay on his back in the sand, staring up at a sky so blue it hurt to look at. The sun hammered down like the wrath of an angry god. And somewhere in the back of his dehydrated mind, he thought about how stupid it was that he was going to die because his horse had stepped in a damn prairie dog hole. 3 days. That's how long he'd been walking. Or was it 4? Time had started to blur somewhere around the second sunrise when he'd finished the last drops from his canteen and realized with crystalline clarity that he was in serious trouble. The Nevada desert didn't care about his regrets. It didn't care that he'd survived a dozen gunfights, 2 range wars, and that winter in the Dakota Territory that had killed half the cattle in 3 counties. The desert was indifferent, ancient, and infinitely patient. It had swallowed better men than him. Elias's lips were split and bleeding. His tongue felt like a piece of old leather someone had left in an oven. When he tried to swallow, his throat clicked dryly, a sound like bones rattling in a cup. His eyes were so dry he could barely blink. He'd stopped sweating yesterday. That's when he knew it was really over. The body stops sweating when there's nothing left to give. After that comes the confusion, the stumbling, the hallucinations. Then you lie down just for a minute, you tell yourself, and you never get up again. The buzzards had already found him. He could hear their wings, that distinctive whoosh whoosh, as they circled overhead, patient like the desert. They knew how this ended. Elias thought about his mother, dead 20 years now, wondered if she'd be waiting on the other side, or if she'd be too ashamed of what he'd become to acknowledge him. He thought about the men he'd killed, some who'd deserved it, some who probably hadn't. He thought about Sarah Jane Hewitt, who'd loved him once in a town called Silverton before he'd ridden away because staying still felt like dying. Funny how actual dying made that seem foolish. His vision was starting to tunnel, darkness creeping in from the edges. The sky seemed farther away now, like he was looking up through a long tube. His heartbeat thundered in his ears, too fast and irregular. Not long now, the buzzard circled lower. Then, through the roaring in his ears, he heard something else. Hoof betats. Elias tried to lift his head, but his neck muscles wouldn't cooperate. He managed to roll his eyes sideways, squinting against the brutal sunlight. The heat made everything shimmer and dance, reality mixing with mirage. He'd been seeing things for hours. Phantom riders, impossible pools of water, his dead mother beckoning from the shadow of rocks that weren't there. This was probably another hallucination. Had to be. But the hoof betats got louder, and then a shadow fell across his face, blissfully blocking the sun, and he heard a woman's voice say, "Oh God, how long have you been out here?" Elias tried to speak. His mouth opened, but only a faint croaking sound emerged, like a dying crow. Then hands touched his face, real hands, solid and cool, and fingers pressed against his neck, checking for a pulse. "You're alive. Okay. Okay. Listen to me." The voice was young, female, and edged with controlled panic. "I'm going to give you water, but you have to take it slow. You understand? If you drink too fast, you'll vomit, and that'll kill you faster. Do you understand?" Elias managed the smallest nod. "Good. That's good." An arm slid under his shoulders, lifting him just slightly. The movement sent spikes of pain through his head, and for a moment the world grayed out completely. But then something pressed against his cracked lips, the mouth of a canteen. And cool water trickled into his mouth. His body screamed at him to gulp it down, to tear the canteen away and drain it. But the woman controlled the flow, letting just a small amount pass his lips at a time. Slow, she murmured. That's it. Slow. The water was the most beautiful thing Elias had ever tasted. It burned the cracks in his lips and the raw tissue of his throat. But it was life itself, flowing back into his depleted body. He took 3 small sips, and then the canteen pulled away. No, he croaked. Yes, you wait 2 minutes, then more. Too much at once will make you sick. Through blurred vision, Elias tried to focus on his rescuer. He got an impression of a young woman, maybe mid-20s, with dark hair pulled back under a dusty hat. She wore men's work clothes, canvas pants, a faded blue shirt, boots worn down at the heels. Her face was sunbred and pretty in a no-nonsense way, with sharp cheekbones and eyes the color of creek water after a rain. How long, he managed. How long have you been out here? I don't know. Days by the look of you. She glanced around at the barren landscape, then back at him. Where's your horse? Dead, maybe 5 miles back, broke his leg. She nodded, unsurprised. And you've been walking since then? Yes, ma'am. Did you have water? Run out yesterday? Day before? Can't remember. Christ, she lifted the canteen again. All right, a few more sips. This time the water went down easier. Elias felt his body starting to wake up, nerves firing again, pain receptors remembering how to do their job. His head throbbed, his skin felt like it had been scoured with hot sand. Every muscle ached, but he was alive. Can you stand? The woman asked. Elias tried to push himself up. His arms trembled violently, and he made it about 6 in before collapsing back down. No, ma'am, don't think I can. She sat back on her heels, thinking. Behind her a buckskin horse stood patiently, res hanging loose. The horse looked well cared for, with good muscle and a calm temperament. A working animal, not some gentleman's show pony. All right, the woman said, decision made. We're going to do this the hard way. I'm going to get you on Sardi here, and we're going to take it real slow. My ranch is about 2 hours north. You think you can hold on that long? I'll try. You'll do more than try. You die on me after I've gone through all this trouble. I'm going to be seriously annoyed. Despite everything, Elias felt the corner of his mouth twitch. Yes, ma'am. Stop calling me ma'am. Makes me feel like my mother. Name's Haven. Haven Locke. Elias Crowley. Well, Mr. Crowley, let's get you up. What followed was a brutal, exhausting process that left both of them soaked with sweat. Haven was stronger than she looked, ranch strong, with muscles built from years of hard work. But Elias was a dead weight, his body barely responding to his commands. She got him first to sitting, then to kneeling. Then, with her shoulder under his arm and her back braced against his weight, she levered him upright. The world tilted sickeningly. Elias's vision whited out, and he felt his knees buckle. No, you don't, Haven grunted, taking his full weight. Stay with me, Crowley. Try harder. She half-dragged, half-carried him to her horse. Sadie, to her credit, didn't spook or dance away. Just stood solid as a rock while Haven positioned Elias beside her. Getting him into the saddle took another 5 minutes of grunting effort, with Elias trying to help, but mostly just being hauled up like a sack of grain. Finally, he was mounted, slumped forward over the saddle horn, his hands tangled in Sardi's mane. You stay conscious, Haven ordered, swinging up behind him. Her arms came around his waist, holding him steady. She gathered the reins and Sardi started walking. Talk to me. Tell me something. Where were you headed before your horse went down? Wasn't headed anywhere particular, Elias mumbled, his head lulled back against her shoulder. Just drifting. Drifting, Haven's tone was skeptical, through the Nevada desert in July. That's some poor planning, Mr. Crowley. Seemed like a good idea at the time. What were you running from? The question was sharp, perceptive. Elias didn't answer immediately. The rhythmic swaying of the horse was hypnotic, and he could feel himself starting to slide away into unconsciousness. Hey. Haven shook him slightly. Stay awake. What were you running from? Who says I was running? Men don't drift through the desert for no reason. They're either running from something or looking for something. You don't strike me as the looking type. Maybe I'm just unlucky. Maybe. Or maybe you made your own bad luck. Wouldn't be the first cowboy to do that. They rode in silence for a while. The sun was starting to sink toward the horizon now, the brutal heat mellowing into a merely oppressive warmth. Long shadows stretched across the sand and the light took on that peculiar golden quality that the desert gets at dusk, beautiful and lonely and vast. Elias kept trying to stay conscious, but it was like holding water in his hands. His mind would drift, and he'd come back to find minutes had passed. Once he jerked awake to find Haven singing softly, some old folk ballad about a girl who waited for her sailor to come home. Her voice was surprisingly lovely, clear and true, with a melancholy edge that suited the empty landscape. "Sorry," she said when she noticed him stirring. "Old habit, helps pass the time." "Don't stop," Elias murmured. "It's nice." So she sang, and he listened, and Sadi carried them both through the cooling desert as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and red and purple. "Almost there," Haven said eventually. "See those hills? Ranch is just on the other side." Elias squinted ahead. Sure enough, he could make out a line of low hills, and beyond them the suggestion of green trees, probably, which meant water. The sight of it made his chest ache with relief. They crested the hills, and the lock ranch spread out below them in the gathering dusk. It wasn't much, a collection of weathered buildings clustered around a central yard with corral and a barn, and what looked like a bunkhouse. But after days in the desert, it looked like paradise. There were trees, real trees, cottonwoods and willows, which meant a creek or spring somewhere nearby. Lamplight glowed in the windows of the main house, warm and welcoming. "Home," Haven said simply. As they descended toward the buildings, men emerged from the barn, ranch hands drawn by the sound of hoofbeats. 3 of them, all with the weathered look of men who'd spent their lives outdoors. They stopped short when they saw Haven riding double with a half-dead man draped across her saddle. Miss Haven. One of them, older with a grey-shot beard and a concerned expression, stepped forward. "Who's that you got there? Found him in the desert about 5 metres south, near dead from dehydration." Haven reined Sadi to a halt. "Matteo helped me get him down. Careful, he can barely stand." The older man, Matteo, came forward with practiced efficiency. He was stronger than his lean frame suggested, and between him and Haven, they got Elias off the horse and standing more or less. The ground swayed beneath his feet. "Get him to the spare room," Haven ordered. "Then bring water, broth if Martha's got any ready, and clean cloths. He'll need his clothes cut off. They're half sand at this point anyway." "You sure about this, Miss Haven?" another of the hands asked. He was younger, with suspicious eyes. "We don't know this man from Adam." "I know he was dying in the desert, and I wasn't going to leave him there," Haven replied sharply. "You have a problem with that, Caleb?" Caleb's jaw tightened, but he shook his head. "No, ma'am." "Good. Now move." They half-carried Elias into the main house, through a neat parlor, and down a short hallway to a small bedroom. The bed felt like the finest hotel mattress Elias had ever encountered, though in reality it was just a simple corn husk tick. He barely registered them, removing his boots and cutting away his ruined shirt before darkness took him completely sub. He woke to lamplight and the sound of quiet voices. "Don't know anything about him, Haven. Could be a murderer, a thief. Hell, he could be running from the law. Or he could be exactly what he looks like, a cowboy who got unlucky. Either way, Matteo, I'm not going to leave a man to die in the desert because he might be trouble. Your father would have been more careful." "My father's dead. I make the decisions now." There was a long pause, and then Matteo sighed. "You're right. I'm sorry. It's just you can't save everyone, Haven. Sometimes trying just gets you hurt. Maybe, but I can save this one." Elias opened his eyes. The room was small but clean, with whitewashed walls and simple furnishings. Haven sat in a chair beside the bed, and the older man, Matteo, stood near the door, his hat in his hands. They both turned when they heard him stir. "Welcome back," Haven said. "How do you feel?" Elias took inventory. His head still ached, and his skin felt tight and hot. Sunburn, probably severe. His throat was raw, but the desperate dying thirst was gone, replaced by just regular thirst. "Like I got dragged behind a horse for 10 me, but better than I did." "That's the spirit. Think you can drink some broth?" "Yes, ma'am." Miss Haven, he corrected when she shot him a look. She smiled faintly and stood. I'll get some. Matteo, stay with him. After she left, Matteo moved closer to the bed. His expression was neutral, but his eyes were sharp, measuring, evaluating. You're a lucky man, Mr. Crowley. Miss Haven doesn't usually ride that far south. If she had taken the north pasture route like she planned, you'd be vulture food right now. I know it. I'm grateful. See that you remember that Miss Haven's got a kind heart, maybe too kind for this country. She sees the best in people even when she shouldn't. Matteo's gaze hardened slightly. But I don't have that problem, so let me be clear. You cause any trouble here, bring any danger to this ranch or to her, and kind heart or not, I'll put you back in that desert myself. We clear? Elias met his eyes steadily, crystal clear. And for what it's worth, I'm not here to cause trouble. Soon as I'm on my feet, I'll be on my way. We'll see about that. Miss Haven tends to take in strays, and they have a way of sticking around. Matteo's expression softened slightly, but I'll say this. You seem like you got some honor in you. Try to live up to it while you're here. Before Elias could respond, Haven returned carrying a bowl of broth that steamed gently in the lamplight. All right, Matteo, stop intimidating my patient. I need him to recover, not stress himself to death. Just having a conversation, Miss Haven. Uh-huh. Go make sure the boys got the horses settled for the night and check on that fence in the east pasture. I thought I saw signs of cutting today. Matteo's expression darkened again. Maybe. I hope I'm wrong, but check anyway. After Matteo left, Haven pulled her chair closer and held out the bowl. Think you can hold this, or do you need help? Elias pushed himself up to sitting, biting back a groan as every muscle protested. I can manage. Proud man. I respect that. But she kept her hands close, ready to catch the bowl if he faltered. He didn't. The broth was simple. Chicken or beef. He couldn't tell, but it was warm and salty and exactly what his depleted body needed. He forced himself to eat slowly, remembering Haven's earlier warning about taking things too fast. You mentioned fence cutting, he said between sips. That's a problem out here. Haven's expression tightened. It's becoming one. We've had 3 incidents in the last month. Post cut, wire snipped, cattle wandering off. Last week, someone poisoned one of our watering holes. You know who's doing it? I have suspicions, but suspicions and proof are different things. She stood and moved to the window, looking out into the darkness. There's a man named Lucian Hartley, mining tycoon. Made his fortune in silver down in Colorado. He's been buying up land all through this valley, making offers that seem generous at first until you realize he's trying to control all the water rights. And when people don't sell, accidents start happening. Fences get cut, livestock dies, buildings catch fire. Haven's voice was heard. My father refused to sell. He died 6 months ago, thrown from his horse, they said. But my father was the best horseman in 3 counties. He wouldn't get thrown from a gentle mare in broad daylight. Elias felt something cold settle in his stomach. You think Hartley killed him? I think my father died very conveniently, for a man who wanted our land. She turned back to face him. But like I said, suspicions aren't proof, and Hartley's got the sheriff in his pocket along with half the territorial officials. I'm just one woman trying to hold on to a ranch that's been in my family for 20 years. Why not sell, take the money and start somewhere else? Haven's eyes flashed. Because this is my home. Because my father built this place with his bare hands, and I'll be damned if I let some snake in a fancy suit steal it from me. Because if we all sell, if we all just roll over and let men like Hartley take whatever they want, then what kind of world are we living in? The passion in her voice stirred something in Elias, something that had been dormant for a long time. He'd spent years drifting, avoiding exactly this kind of trouble, telling himself that other people's fights weren't his concern. But looking at Haven now, seeing the determination in her face mixed with the fear she was trying to hide, he felt that old instinct wake up. The one that had gotten him into so much trouble over the years, the one that made him step into fights that weren't his to fight. How many hands do you have? He asked. 3 full-time. Matteo's the foreman, been with my father since the beginning. Then there's Caleb and young Pete. Good men, loyal, but we need at least 6 for a place this size, and I can't afford to hire more. not with cattle prices down and Hartley controlling most of the markets around here anyway. What about the law? Sheriff won't help, Haven laughed bitterly. The sheriff's office is in Hartley's pocket. Like I said, last time I reported the fence cutting, Deputy Morrison came out, looked around for 5 minutes, and told me it was probably just coyotes. Coyotes with wire cutters, apparently. Elias finished the broth and set the bowl aside. His body was still exhausted, but his mind was starting to work again, turning over the problem. It was a familiar pattern. He'd seen it before in a dozen different towns and territories. Powerful man wants something, uses intimidation and violence to get it, hides behind a facade of respectability. The law either looks the other way or actively helps him. You said you found me about 5 mei south, he asked. Give or take, why was I on your land? Edge of it. We own about 2 sections in that direction, mostly grazing land. Why? Elias was quiet for a moment, thinking. No reason, just trying to get my bearings. Haven studied him, and he could see her intelligence working behind those creek-water eyes. She wasn't fooled, but she didn't push. You should rest. You're not out of the woods yet. You'll probably feel worse tomorrow as your body catches up with what it's been through. I felt worse. I believe that. She moved to the door, then paused. Thank you, by the way. For what? You saved my life. For not asking why I was riding out that far. For not making it into something more than it was. Just a woman doing what needed doing. Seems to me that's exactly what it was, Elias said. Just a person helping another person. Nothing more complicated than that needs to be. Haven smiled. The first real smile he'd seen from her. It transformed her face, making her look younger and lighter. Get some rest, Mr. Crowley. We'll talk more in the morning. After she left, Elias lay in the darkness, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the house settling around him. Somewhere outside, a horse nickered softly. Farther away, a coyote sang its lonely song to the stars. He should leave as soon as he was able, he told himself. This wasn't his fight. Haven Locke had saved his life, and he was grateful. But the best thing he could do for her was to heal up and move on before he brought more trouble down on her head, because trouble followed him. It always had. But even as he thought it, Elias knew he was lying to himself. There was something about Haven Locke, about her stubborn courage and the way she refused to be pushed around, that called to something deep in his nature. She reminded him of why he'd become a lawman in the first place, before politics and corruption had soured him on the badge. She reminded him that some things were worth fighting for. Outside, the coyote howled again, and Elias closed his eyes and let sleep take him. Tomorrow would be soon enough to figure out what kind of man he wanted to be. Tonight he was just grateful to be alive. He woke 3 more times during the night, once to drink more water, once when fever dreams made him thrash and call out, and once to the sound of horses moving in the yard. Each time, Haven appeared like a ghost, pressing cool cloths to his forehead, helping him drink, murmuring reassurances in the darkness. The third time, when the horses woke him, she sat in the chair by his bed and explained, "Night patrol. We've been running them since the trouble started. 2 men, 4-hour shifts. Smart, necessary." She adjusted the blanket around him. "How's the fever?" "Breaking, I think." "Good. You're tough, Mr. Crowley. Tougher than you look." "Had practice. I bet you have." She was quiet for a moment, and in the dim light filtering through the curtains, her face looked tired. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure. When you were out there dying, what did you think about?" The question caught him off guard. He thought about lying, giving her some comfortable answer about heaven or peace. But something about the hour, about the quiet intimacy of the sick room in the middle of the night, made him tell the truth. "Regrets," he said simply. "All the things I should have done different. All the people I should have treated better." Haven nodded slowly. "Yeah, I imagine that's what most of us would think about." She stood, moving to the window. "My father, when he was dying, I asked him if he had regrets. You know what he said?" "What?" "He said his only regret was that he wouldn't get to see how my story turned out. He wanted to know if I'd be happy, if I'd find someone to share this place with, if I'd have kids to pass it on to." Her voice was thick with emotion. "I told him not to worry, that of course I would. But now he's gone and I'm here alone. And I wonder if he died knowing I was lying. You're not alone, Elias said quietly. You've got Matteo and the others. That's not the same, and you know it. She turned back to face him. Do you have anyone, Mr. Crowley? Anyone who'd mourn you if you died out there? Elias thought about it and realized the answer was probably no. He had acquaintances, scattered across a dozen territories, men who'd buy him a drink or give him a job, but no one who'd grieve, no one whose life would have a hole in it if he was gone. No, he admitted, not really. Then we're alike, you and me. Two lonely people in a lonely land. Haven moved back to the chair and sat down. Get some rest. Morning comes early on a ranch, but Elias found he wasn't quite ready to sleep. Can I ask you something now? Fair's fair. Why'd you ride out that far south? Matteo said it wasn't your usual route. Haven was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft, almost dreamlike. I had a feeling that morning I woke up and just felt like I needed to ride that direction. My father used to talk about hunches like that. Said his mother had them, and her mother before her. Said some people are just tuned into the world in a different way. She laughed self-consciously. Sounds crazy. I know. No, Elias said it doesn't sound crazy at all because he'd had feelings like that too. The morning he'd gotten up early and checked his horse's shoes, only to find a loose nail that would have lamed the animal if he'd ridden hard. The day he decided to take a different trail and later learned there had been an ambush on the usual route. You could call it intuition, or luck, or divine providence, but whatever it was, Elias had learned to listen to it. Maybe Haven's hunch had saved both their lives, his because she'd found him, and hers because maybe she'd needed him for what was coming. Thank you, he said again, for listening to that feeling. Thank you for not dying, and making me feel foolish for writing all that way. They smiled at each other in the darkness, and for a moment something passed between them. A connection, tentative and fragile, but real. Then Haven stood, breaking the spell. Sleep now. For real this time. Yes, ma'am. Haven. Haven. She left, and this time Elias did sleep deeply and without dreams, his body finally convinced that he was safe, that he would live, that tomorrow would come. And it did. Morning light filtered through the curtains, and with it came the sounds of a working ranch. Roosters crowing, men's voices calling to each other, the creak of the windmill turning in the breeze. Elias sat up slowly, testing his body. Everything hurt, but it was the healthy hurt of healing muscles, not the desperate pain of dying. Someone had left fresh clothes folded on the chair, worn but clean, probably hand-me-downs from one of the hands. There was also a basin of water and a small mirror. Elias stood shakily and made his way to it. The face that looked back at him from the mirror was a mess. His skin was burned and peeling, his lips still cracked and scabbed. His eyes were bloodshot, and several days of stubble made him look more like an outlaw than a respectable ranch hand. But he was alive. That was what mattered. He washed as best he could and struggled into the borrowed clothes. They fit well enough. The previous owner had been about his size. When he finally emerged from the room, the smell of coffee and frying bacon drew him to the kitchen like a compass needle to north. Haven stood at the stove, her back to him, stirring something in a cast-iron skillet. She'd changed from yesterday's trail clothes into a simple cotton dress the color of faded denim. Her dark hair braided and pinned up in a practical style. Sunlight from the window made dust motes dance around her, and for a moment Elias just stood there, struck by the simple domesticity of the scene. You going to stand there all morning, or are you going to sit down and eat? Haven asked without turning around. How do you know I was here? You're a big man, Mr. Crowley, and this is an old house. The floor cucks. She turned and gestured to the table. Sit, you need to eat. Elias sat at the worn kitchen table while Haven loaded a plate with eggs, bacon, and thick slices of bread toasted in bacon grease. When she set it in front of him, his stomach growled loudly enough to hear. Easy, she warned, echoing her words from yesterday. Your body's been through a lot. Eat slow. But it took all his willpower to follow that advice. The food was simple ranch fare, but it tasted better than anything he'd eaten in months. He forced himself to take small bites, to chew slowly, even though he wanted to shovel it all down like a starving dog. Haven poured coffee strong and black and sat across from him with her own cup. You look better. Still like hell, but better. Thank you, I think. How's the stomach? Any nausea? No, ma'am. Haven. Sorry. Old habits. It's fine. My mother would have liked the manners. Her expression grew distant. She died when I was 12. Fever. My father never really recovered from losing her. I'm sorry. Long time ago now. Haven sipped her coffee. What about you? Family. Mother died when I was young, like yours. Father, I don't know. He left when I was 6. Never came back. Brothers, sisters? Had a sister, Lily. She died of cholera when she was 8. Haven's expression softened with sympathy. So you've been alone a long time. Yeah, I guess I have. They sat in comfortable silence while Elias finished his breakfast. Through the window, he could see the ranch coming to life, Mateo and the other hands moving between the barn and corral. A woman emerging from what must be the cookhouse carrying a bucket, chickens scratching in the yard. That's Martha, Haven said, following his gaze. She cooks for the hands and helps me with the house. Her husband, Carlos, works the horses, best wrangler in the territory. How big is this place? About 3,000 acres, give or take. We run about 500 head of cattle, plus horses. Used to be bigger, but we had to sell off some sections after my father died. Her mouth tightened. To Hartley, of course. He made sure no one else could bid. How'd he manage that? Bought the bank, bought the newspaper, bought everyone who matters in the county seat. Like I said, he's got power and money, and he's not afraid to use both. Elias was quiet, thinking, what about neighboring ranches? Anyone else standing up to him? There were 3 other families who refused to sell. The Johnsons' barn burned down last fall, lost half their winter hay. They sold 2 months later. The Chen family's well got poisoned. They held on for a while, but their youngest son got sick from the water. They sold in March. Haven's hands tightened around her coffee cup. The Reeves family. They had a place about 10 minutes east. They refused to sell, even after someone shot through their windows. Then Mr. Reeves had an accident with a piece of equipment, nearly lost his arm. They were on a stage to California within the week. And you're the last holdout. Me and the Broken Arrow Ranch about 20 minutes north, but they're corporate-owned, run by managers in San Francisco. They don't care about the land the way we do. They'll probably sell as soon as Hartley makes it worth their while. Haven met his eyes. So, yes. Essentially, I'm the last one standing in his way. That makes you dangerous to him. I know, but what am I supposed to do? Run. Let him win. Let him turn this whole valley into a mining operation that'll poison the water and tear up the land. She shook her head fiercely. This place is worth fighting for. The land, the water, the life we've built here. It means something. Elias believed her. He could see it in every line of her face, hear it in every word. This wasn't just about stubbornness or pride. This was about home, about legacy, about refusing to let bullies and tyrants reshape the world through fear and violence. The kind of fight he'd walked away from too many times. I should tell you something, he said slowly, about who I am, what I've done. Haven leaned back in her chair, waiting. I wasn't always just a drifting cowboy. About 10 years ago, I was a deputy marshal in Kansas, then a range detective for the Cattlemen's Association in Wyoming Territory, then a town marshal in New Mexico. He paused. I was good at it. Real good. I had a reputation for finding the truth, for solving problems that other lawmen couldn't or wouldn't. What happened? Politics, corruption. Every place I went, eventually I'd run into the same thing. Powerful men who thought the law didn't apply to them. And every time I tried to do my job, tried to hold them accountable, I'd get pushed out. Sometimes legally, sometimes not so legally. He rubbed his jaw, remembering last straw was in New Mexico, town marshal in a place called Bitter Springs. There was a rancher there named of Colton Hayes. He decided the water rights on a certain creek belonged to him. Never mind that 3 families had been using it for 20 years, he dammed it up, cut off their water. Let me guess, Haven said. You tried to make him take the dam down. I tried to do it legal. Got a judge to rule against him. Hayes didn't care, kept the dam up anyway. So I gathered up some deputies and went to take it down myself. Elias's voice went flat. Turned out Hayes had paid off the sheriff and half the town council. They arrested me for destruction of property and conspiracy. I spent 3 days in jail before a friend helped me escape. Been drifting ever since, too tired to fight and too stubborn to completely give up. Haven absorbed this in silence. Then she said, "So what are you telling me? That you can't help? That you're too broken to fight?" "I'm telling you that I've got a talent for making situations worse. That men like Hartley, I've gone up against them before, and I've lost more times than I've won." He met her eyes. "I'm telling you that if I stay here, I'll probably bring more trouble down on your head. And if you leave, then you're on your own, which might be safer for you in the long run." Haven stood and walked to the window, looking out at her land, her home, her life. When she turned back, her expression was set with determination. "I don't want safe, Mr. Crowley. I want a fighting chance, and right now you're the closest thing to hope I've got." She crossed her arms. "You say you're tired of fighting. I understand that. But are you so tired that you can watch someone else lose everything without at least trying to help? Because that's not the man I pulled out of the desert. That man was still fighting even when his body was giving up. That man had something in him worth saving." Elias felt something shift in his chest. She was right. Damn her. For all his cynicism and weariness, he wasn't dead inside. Not yet. And maybe this was his chance not to redeem a lifetime of failures, but just to do one thing right, to help one person hold on to what mattered. "If I stay," he said slowly, "I do it my way. No half measures. We gather evidence on Hartley, build a real case, and if the law won't help, we find another way. But we do it smart, not reckless. I can live with that, and when this is over, assuming we both survive, I move on. I'm not looking for a home, Haven. I'm just looking to do the right thing for once." Something flickered across Haven's face. Disappointment, maybe, or sadness. But she nodded. "Understood. So do we have a deal?" Elias stood and extended his hand. "We have a deal." Her grip was firm, calloused, strong, the handshake of someone who worked for everything she had. "Good," Haven said, "because we've got a lot of work to do and not much time to do it in." As if to punctuate her words, the sound of approaching horses carried through the open window. Multiple riders moving fast. Haven's expression tightened. "That's not Mateo and the boys," she said. "They're all out on the range." They moved to the window together. In the distance, a cloud of dust rose from the road. 3 riders, maybe 4, coming hard. As they got closer, Elias could make out details. Expensive horses, good tack. Men dressed too well to be working cowboys. "Hartley's men," Haven breathed. "Damn it, he must have heard about you somehow." "What would he care about me? Because Hartley doesn't like variables he can't control. A stranger showing up on my ranch, especially one with a lawman's bearing, that's going to make him nervous." The riders thundered into the yard, pulling up in a spray of gravel. The lead man was in his 40s, well dressed in a tailored suit that must have cost more than most ranch hands made in a year. He had the look of a man used to authority with cold eyes and a thin smile that didn't reach them. But he wasn't Hartley. Elias could tell that immediately. This was an employee, probably the enforcer, the man who did Hartley's dirty work and made problems disappear. "Miss Lockhart," the man called out, his voice carrying clearly through the morning air. "We need to have a conversation." Haven squared her shoulders and walked out onto the porch. Elias followed, standing slightly behind her, close enough to back her up, far enough to not look overtly threatening. "Mr. Brennan," Haven said coolly, "this is private property. You weren't invited." Brennan's thin smile widened. "Now, is that any way to greet a neighbor? Mr. Hartley wanted me to check on you, make sure you're doing all right. He heard you've had some difficulties. The only difficulty I have is people cutting my fences and poisoning my water. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" "Me? Miss Lockhart? I'm hurt you'd even suggest such a thing." Brennan's gaze slid past her to Elias, and something cold entered his expression. "Though I'm curious about your new friend here. Don't believe we've met." "We haven't," Elias said. His voice was mild, but there was steel underneath. "And we're not going to. This conversation's between you and Miss Lockhart. Is that right?" Brennan dismounted his men, following suit. "See, that's interesting, because Mr. Hartley likes to know who's in the valley." especially when they show up at the one ranch that's been causing him concern. Makes him wonder if Miss Lockatch here is bringing in outside help. Gunfighters, maybe. Troublemakers. I'm no gunfighter, Elias said truthfully. Just a cowboy who got lost in the desert. Lost. Brennan's tone made it clear he didn't believe a word. Well, sometimes lost men keep getting lost, if you take my meaning. Accidents happen in this country. Men ride out and don't come back. Would be a shame if that happened to you. The threat was delivered with a smile, but it was unmistakable. Elias felt his muscles tense, that old familiar readiness flooding through him. He was still weak from his ordeal in the desert, but he'd been in worse shape and handled worse men. Mr. Brennan, Haven said sharply, drawing attention back to her, you've delivered your message. Now, I'd like you to leave. In a moment. First, Mr. Hartley wanted me to extend one more offer, a generous one. $20,000 for your land and water rights. That's twice what your father paid for the whole place. You could go anywhere, start fresh, live comfortable for the rest of your life. My answer is the same as it's always been. No. That's unfortunate because Mr. Hartley's patience isn't infinite and the valley's changing. Men who don't change with it tend to get left behind or worse. Brennan gestured to the ranch around them. Be a shame if something happened to this pretty place. Fire, maybe, or an accident during roundup. Cattle stampede, men get trampled. Happens all the time. Now it was Elias who stepped forward, placing himself between Haven and Brennan. I think you've said enough. Time for you to ride out. Brennan's eyes narrowed. You're making a mistake, friend. Mr. Hartley doesn't like people interfering in his business, and I don't like bullies who threaten women. Seems like we're both going to be disappointed. For a long moment, the two men stared at each other. Brennan's hand drifted toward his coat, toward a gun, Elias suspected, and he prepared himself to move fast if necessary. Then Brennan smiled that thin smile again and stepped back. We'll be seeing you, Miss Locke, you too, Cowboy, real soon. They mounted up and rode out, but not before one of Brennan's men turned and spat in the dirt, a contemptuous gesture that made its own statement. After they were gone, Haven let out a long breath. Well, that was unpleasant. That was a declaration of war, Elias said grimly. They're not pretending anymore. Next time they come, it won't be for conversation. I know. Haven's voice was steady, but he could see the fear underneath. Which means we need to move fast. If you're really going to help me, we need to start now. Agreed. First thing, I want to look at those fences that got cut. See if there's anything that might tell us who's responsible, and if there's not, then we start digging into Hartley's operation. Find out who works for him, what other properties he's got, where his money comes from. Elias met her eyes. You said he's made enemies. Time to find them and see if they'll talk. Haven nodded slowly. All right, but first you need to meet the men properly. If we're going to do this, they need to know who you are and that I trust you. Do you trust me? I mean, she looked at him for a long moment, those creek-water eyes searching his face. I trust that you're a good man who's been dealt some bad hands. I trust that you want to help. And right now, that's enough. It would have to be. They spent the rest of the morning with Mateo and the other hands, Caleb, young Pete, and Carlos. Elias told them an abbreviated version of his history, leaving out some details, but giving them enough to understand he knew his way around trouble. Mateo remained skeptical, but willing to give him a chance. Caleb was openly hostile, making it clear he thought bringing in a stranger was a mistake. You're going to get her killed, Caleb said bluntly when Haven was out of earshot. Hartley sees her bringing in a gun hand. He's going to escalate. Next time it won't be threats, it'll be bullets. I'm not a gun hand, Elias said patiently. And if I leave, do you really think Hartley will back off? He's already escalating. At least this way, she has someone with experience dealing with men like him. Experience losing to them, you mean? The words stung because they were true, but Elias kept his voice level. Yeah, I've lost before, which means I know the mistakes to avoid. You got a better plan? Caleb didn't answer, just stalked off to work on a corral fence with more violence than necessary. Young Pete, by contrast, was eager and friendly, barely 20, with a smooth face and eyes full of naive confidence. Don't mind Caleb, he said cheerfully. He's just worried about Miss Haven. We all are. But it's good you're here. We need the help. Carlos, the horse wrangler, was harder to read. He was a small man in his 50s, with weathered brown skin and intelligent eyes. He watched Elias carefully, saying little, clearly forming his own judgment. It was Martha, Carlos's wife, who finally broke the ice. She was a round woman with warm eyes and flour-dusted hands, and she took one look at Elias and declared, "Too skinny. You need to eat more. Come to the cookhouse for lunch. I'll put meat on those bones." After that, the others seemed to relax slightly. If Martha approved, that counted for something. By afternoon, Elias felt strong enough to ride out with Haven to check the fence lines. Mateo saddled a gentle ran geeling for him. Nothing fancy, but he won't throw you, and they headed east toward the section where the most recent cutting had occurred. The land opened up before them in rolling hills covered with desert grass and scattered juniper. In the distance, mountains rose blue and hazy against the sky. It was beautiful country, harsh but honest, the kind of place that didn't lie to you about what it was. "My father used to say this land would outlast us all," Haven said as they rode. "He said we were just borrowing it for a while, and our job was to leave it better than we found it." She gestured around them. That's why he fought so hard to keep it intact. Why he wouldn't sell to Hartley even when the offers got ridiculous. It wasn't about the money, it was about stewardship. Smart man. He was stubborn as hell, but smart. Haven smiled sadly. You would have liked him. He had a way of seeing people, understanding what they were about. He would have seen through your just a drifting cowboy act in about 5 seconds. It's not entirely an act. No, but it's not entirely the truth either. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, following a fence line that stretched across the hills like a stitched seam. Elias kept his eyes moving, reading the land the way he'd learned to read crime scenes, looking for details that told a story, for patterns that revealed truth. The cut fence was obvious when they reached it. 3 strands of barbed wire had been snipped with cutters, the ends curling back. Several posts had been pulled up and tossed aside. A gap wide enough for cattle to wander through had been created. Elias dismounted and knelt beside the nearest post. "When did you find this?" 4 days ago. We fixed it the same day, but you can still see where they did it." He examined the cut wires closely. The cuts were clean, professional, made with good tools by someone who knew what they were doing. He studied the ground around the fence, looking for tracks. There, boot prints, partially obscured by wind and time, but still visible. 2 sets, maybe 3. Men had stood here while they worked, taking their time. One set of prints was deeper, a heavier man. The others were lighter, but still booted, probably ranch hands or hired muscle. "They weren't in a hurry," Elias said, standing. "Took their time, did it right." Which means either they were confident they wouldn't get caught, or what? Or they wanted you to find it. Wanted you to know it was deliberate. Haven's jaw tightened. Intimidation. Yeah. Elias moved to his horse and pulled a small notebook from his saddlebag, something he'd borrowed from Haven that morning. He sketched the scene quickly, noting the position of the cuts, the tracks, the direction they led. Old habits from his martial days. "You think they'll hit again?" Haven asked. "Count on it. This is just the opening move. They want you scared, want you looking over your shoulder, want you to feel like it's inevitable." He mounted up and surveyed the land around them. Next step is usually something bigger. They've done property damage. Next comes livestock. More than just a poisoned waterhole. Then they'll threaten the people you care about. The hands or you. Haven's hand moved unconsciously to her hip, where Elias noticed for the first time she wore a pistol in a worn holster. She saw him looking and smiled grimly. "My father taught me to shoot when I was 10. I'm not helpless. Never thought you were, but there's a difference between being able to shoot and being willing to kill. Hartley's men won't hesitate. Will you?" It was a hard question, and Haven took her time answering. Finally, she said, "If it came down to protecting my people or my home, yes, I'd kill to protect what's mine. I hope it doesn't come to that, but I won't lie to myself about what might be necessary." Elias nodded. He believed her. There was steel in Haven Lock, the kind that was forged by hardship and loss. She wasn't playing at being tough. She was the real thing. They followed the fence line for another hour, checking for more damage. Found two more places where wires had been cut, both relatively fresh. Someone was being systematic, probing the defenses, looking for weak points. We need to set up regular patrols, Elias said. 2 men armed, riding the property at random times. Make it harder for them to predict when they can work unobserved. We already do night patrols. Need to do day patrols too. I know it's a lot of manpower, but if we don't, we'll lose more than just cattle. I understand, Haven sighed. We're stretched thin as it is. But you're right. I'll talk to Mateo about reorganizing the work schedule. They turned back toward the ranch as the sun started its descent toward the western horizon. The light turned everything gold and amber, long shadows stretching across the hills. It was the kind of evening that made Elias understand why people fought for land like this, why they put down roots and refused to let go. For the first time in years, he felt something that wasn't quite peace, but was close to it. A sense of purpose, of being in the right place at the right time. Maybe this was what he'd been drifting toward all along without knowing it. A chance to finally do something that mattered for someone who deserved it. Or maybe he was just fooling himself again, the way he always did. Either way, he was committed now. For better or worse, he'd thrown in with Haven Lock, and he'd see this through to whatever end it brought. As they crested the last hill before the ranch came into view, Haven suddenly reined in her horse. Wait! Elias pulled up beside her, following her gaze. In the valley below he could see the ranch buildings, and in the yard more riders, at least 6 horses, maybe more. That's Hartley's Galing, Haven said quietly, pointing. The big bay. He's here himself this time, then let's not keep him waiting. They rode down together, neither hurrying nor hesitating. As they got closer, Elias could make out more details. The man standing on Haven's porch was tall and distinguished-looking, maybe 50, with silver-shot hair and expensive clothes that somehow managed to look practical rather than pretentious. This was a man who'd worked his way up, not one who'd been born to money. Lucien Hartley had to be. Around him stood his men, Brennan from this morning, plus 4 others, all armed, all watching with the casual alertness of men comfortable with violence. Haven dismounted in the yard, and Elias followed her lead. She walked toward the porch with her head high, every inch the owner of this land. "Mr. Hartley," she said, "you're trespassing." Hartley smiled, a warmer expression than Brennan's cold grin, but no less dangerous. "Miss Lockhart, forgive the intrusion, but after Brennan reported his conversation with you this morning, I felt I should come speak with you personally. We've known each other too long to communicate through intermediaries. We don't know each other at all. You knew my father. I've spoken to you perhaps 3 times in my life. True enough. But I had great respect for your father despite our disagreements. And I have respect for you, Miss Lockhart, which is why I'm here to make you one final offer in person, so there can be no misunderstanding. I'm not interested in Hartley held up a hand. Hear me out, please. Then if you still want to refuse, I'll respect your decision and we'll explore other options." The threat in that last phrase was unmistakable. Haven's jaw tightened, but she nodded. "Fine, say your piece. $25,000 cash for your land, water rights, and cattle. You can keep whatever personal possessions you want. Furniture, equipment, your horses. I'll even throw in a property I own in California near Monterey. Small place, but comfortable ocean views. You could start fresh away from all this." Hartley gestured around at the desert landscape. "This is no life for a woman alone, Haven. No offense intended, but this land will break you eventually. Why not take the money while the offer is good and build a new life somewhere green and gentle?" "Because this is my home," Haven said simply, "and I'm not leaving." Hartley's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "I was afraid you'd say that. Your father had the same stubborn streak." He glanced at Elias. "And who might you be?" "The mysterious stranger who's stirring up trouble. Name's Elias Crowley, and I'm not stirring up anything except the dust Miss Lockhart asked me to help her move." "Is that right? Funny, Mr. Crowley, but Brennan seems to think you're more than just a ranch hand. Something about you says lawman to him. Former law, maybe, but law nonetheless." Hartley's eyes were sharp, assessing. Are you here in some official capacity? Nope, just helping a friend. Friend? That was fast. You've only been here, what, 2 days? Hartley smiled. Miss Lockhart must be very persuasive. Or perhaps you have your own reasons for staying. Either way, I want you to understand something, Mr. Crowley. This valley is changing. I'm bringing progress, jobs, industry, growth. The old ranchers who want to keep things as they were, they're dinosaurs. The future is coming whether they want it or not. I've heard that speech before, Elias said, usually from men who want to justify taking what doesn't belong to them. Progress is a nice word for greed. Hartley's expression hardened. Careful, Mr. Crowley. You're a guest here, but that doesn't give you the right to insult me on Miss Locke's property. You're a guest here too, and you're wearing out your welcome. For a moment, tension crackled in the air. Hartley's men shifted, hands moving closer to their weapons. Elias stood perfectly still, but he was ready, cataloguing positions, angles. Who would draw first if it came to that? Brennan looked eager, hoping for an excuse. Then Hartley laughed, breaking the tension. Well, at least you've got spirit. I'll give you that. He turned back to Haven. My offer stands until the end of the month. After that, he shrugged. After that, things might get more complicated. I hope you'll reconsider, Miss Lockhart, for your sake and for the sake of your people. Goodbye, Mr. Hartley, Haven said firmly. Hartley tipped his hat, mounted his bay Geeling with practiced ease, and rode out with his men following. But before they disappeared down the road, Brennan turned back and locked eyes with Elias. The message was clear. This isn't over. After they were gone, Mateo emerged from the barn where he'd been watching with a rifle. That went about as well as expected. Could have been worse, Haven said, but her voice shook slightly. At least nobody shot anybody. Yet, Mateo said grimly. But it's coming, Miss Haven. You heard him. End of the month, he said. That's 2 weeks. After that, the gloves come off. Elias looked at the sun, now touching the horizon. 2 weeks. Not much time to gather evidence, build a case, find a way to stop a man with power and money, and no scruples. But it would have to be enough. Then we'd better get to work, he said. And as the sun set over the Nevada desert, painting the sky in shades of fire and blood, Elias Crowley accepted that he was no longer running from his past. He was standing still at last, ready to fight for something that mattered, ready to see if he was still the man he used to be before cynicism and defeat had worn him down. Haven Locke had saved his life in the desert. Now it was time to return the favor. The next morning came hard and early with Elias waking to the sound of roosters and the pre-dawn cold that made his breath fog in the air. His body still ached from the desert ordeal, but it was a distant pain now, manageable. He dressed in borrowed clothes and made his way to the kitchen, where Martha already had coffee brewing and biscuits in the oven. You're up early, she said, not unkindly. Most men who nearly died would take a few more days to recover. Can't afford to, Elias replied, pouring himself coffee. Having a round? Out in the barn with Mateo. They've been up since 4 going over the work schedule. Martha pulled the biscuits from the oven, the smell making Elias's stomach rumble. She doesn't sleep much anymore, not since her father died. Worries herself sick trying to keep this place running. She's doing a hell of a job from what I can see. She is, but a person can only carry so much alone before they break. Martha fixed him with a meaningful look. You planning to stick around, or are you the kind who runs when things get hard? It was a fair question, and Elias respected her for asking it directly. I'm staying at least until this business with Hartley is settled. And after? After. I don't know, but I won't leave her in the lurch. Martha seemed satisfied with that answer. She loaded a plate with biscuits and bacon and pushed it toward him. Eat, then go find them. They'll want to start early. Elias found Haven and Mateo in the barn, bent over a crude map of the ranch spread across a saddle rack. Haven's finger traced the property lines while Mateo made notes on a scrap of paper. North pasture needs 2 men minimum, Mateo was saying. That's where the creek runs through, and if Hartley wants to cut off our water, that's where he'll do it. East fence line needs daily checks after those cutings. South Range. South Range is where I was found, Elias interrupted from the doorway. About 5 miles in, you said. Haven looked up, her face tired but alert. That's right. Why? I've been thinking about that. Your land extends that far south, but there's nothing out there. No water, no good grazing. Why do you own it? My father bought it years ago from a prospector who went bust. Said, you never know when worthless land might become valuable. Smart man, what's beyond your southern boundary? Matteo consulted the map. Public land for about 3 miles, then the start of Hartley's mining claims. He's got silver operations all through those hills. Elias moved closer to study the map. So your southern property sits between Hartley's mines and the rest of the valley. Yeah, but like I said, it's worthless. No water, nothing but sand and rock. Maybe. Or maybe there's something there Hartley wants. Elias tapped the map. He's been focused on your water rights, but what if that's not all he's after? What if there's something on that southern section he needs? Haven and Matteo exchanged glances. Like what? Haven asked. Don't know, but I think we should ride out there and take a look. If I'm right, it might give us leverage we didn't know we had. And if you're wrong, then we waste a day riding through the desert, but my gut says I'm not wrong. Matteo grunted. Your gut almost got you killed out there last time. True, but I had Haven to pull me out. This time I'll bring water. Despite the tension, Haven smiled slightly. All right, we'll ride out this afternoon after the morning work is done. Matteo, you're in charge while we're gone. Double the patrols and keep everyone armed. You sure about this, Miss Haven? Riding out with him alone? People will talk. Let them talk. I've got bigger problems than gossip. She rolled up the map. Besides, Mr. Crowley's right. If there's something on that land once, we need to know what it is. They spent the morning working the ranch. Elias helped Carlos in the corral, breaking a young galing to saddle. It felt good to do simple, honest work, the kind of labor that made his muscles burn and his mind quiet. Carlos worked mostly in silence, but Elias could feel the man's assessment continuing, that careful evaluation of character that good horsemen seem to possess. You know horses, Carlos said finally, after Elias had calmed the geeling through a particularly skittish moment. My grandfather raised them, spent my summers on his place until I was 15. What happened at 15? He died, farm got sold, I moved on. Elias stroked the Geldine's neck. Seems like I've been moving ever since. Carlos was quiet for a moment, then said, maybe it's time to stop moving. Maybe. Miss Haven, she's good people, best I've known. She treats Martha and me like family, not just hired help. We die for her. The statement was simple and absolute. Elias met Carlos's eyes and saw the truth there. This quiet man with his weathered hands and gentle way with horses would indeed die to protect Haven Lock. It was both humbling and inspiring. I'm not here to hurt her, Elias said. Didn't think you were, but intention and outcome aren't always the same thing. Men like Hartley, they're poison. They corrupt everything they touch. You get involved fighting them, sometimes the poison spreads. I know, I've seen it happen. But you're doing it anyway. Yeah, I guess I am. Carlos nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something he'd suspected. Then you'll need this. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a gun belt with a well-maintained Colt revolver. Matteo said, you came here without a weapon. Can't fight a war unarmed. Elias took the gun belt, feeling the familiar weight of it. The Colt was clean and oiled, a working man's weapon, not a gunfighter's fancy piece. He checked the action, smooth and reliable, then buckled it around his waist. It settled there like it had never left, and he realized how much he'd missed the solid reassurance of a weapon at his hip. Thank you, he said. Don't thank me. Just don't get killed wearing it. Martha will never let me hear the end of it. By noon the temperature had climbed into the 9s, and the sun beat down with that relentless Nevada intensity. Haven appeared from the house, carrying saddlebags loaded with water, food, and extra ammunition. She changed into riding clothes and had her father's rifle slung across her back. Ready? She asked. As I'll ever be. They rode south, retracing the path Haven had taken when she found him. The landscape was harsh and beautiful in equal measure. Endless vistas of sand and rock, broken by twisted Joshua trees and hearty scrub brush. Mountains shimmered in the distance, their peaks sharp against the cloudless sky. "Tell me about your father," Elias said after they'd been riding for an hour. Haven was quiet for so long, he thought she wasn't going to answer. Then she said, "He was a dreamer in the best way. Came west in '49, chasing gold like everyone else. Didn't find much, but he found something better. Land and water and a vision of what this valley could be. He met my mother in Sacramento, convinced her to marry him even though she was a city girl who'd never seen a ranch. They built this place together, one fence post at a time. Sounds like love. It was the kind of love that makes you believe in things, makes you think maybe the world isn't all hardship and disappointment." Haven's voice grew softer. "When she died, part of him died too. But he kept going for me, kept building, kept fighting to hold on to what they'd created together. I think that's why he refused to sell to Hartley, even when the offers got ridiculous. It would have felt like betraying her memory. And now you're doing the same thing." "I guess I am. Maybe that makes me a fool." "No," Elias said firmly, "it makes you loyal, makes you someone who understands that some things are worth fighting for, even when the odds are bad." They rode on in companionable silence. Around mid-afternoon, they reached the area where Haven had found him. Elias dismounted and walked the ground, trying to remember details from that day. His memories were fragmented, heat and thirst and the certainty of death, but he could recall the general direction he'd been walking. "This way," he said, pointing southwest. "I was heading this direction when I collapsed." They followed his probable path for another mile. The land here was particularly desolate. Not even the hearty desert plants seemed to thrive. Just rock and sand and the occasional bleached bone of some animal that hadn't made it. Then Elias saw something that made him rein in his horse. A line of wooden stakes, weathered and half-buried, marching across the landscape in an unnaturally straight line. "Survey markers," he said. Haven dismounted beside him. "From when, though?" "These look old." Elias knelt and examined the nearest stake. Carved into the wood, almost invisible with age, were initials and a date. 1867. 8 years ago," he said. "Someone surveyed this land 8 years ago." He looked around, trying to see what would have brought a surveyor to this god-forsaken place. "What's HM? Could be anyone. Half the prospectors in Nevada have initials that could fit." Haven followed the line of stakes with her eyes. "They run east to west, cutting across our land. Let's follow them, see where they lead." They tracked the survey line for another 2 minutes, the stakes appearing every 100 yards or so. The line led them to a rocky outcrop, and there, hidden in the shadow of the rocks, was the entrance to an old minehaft. Haven's breath caught. "I didn't know this was here." "Your father never mentioned it." "Never. And I've ridden this range a dozen times, but never this far south." She dismounted and approached the mine entrance carefully. "Could be dangerous. Old shafts collapse." Elias followed her, peering into the darkness. The shaft descended at a steep angle, disappearing into blackness. Timber supports framed the entrance, old but seemingly solid. Someone had put real work into this, which meant they'd been expecting to find something valuable. "We need light," Haven said. She produced a small lantern from her saddlebag, lit it, and held it up to illuminate the shaft. The light revealed rough-hewn walls disappearing into the earth, and something else. Recent boot prints in the dust. "Someone's been here," Elias said quietly. Recently, within the last few days, Haven's hand moved to her rifle. "Hartley's men." "Who else? The question is, what were they looking for?" They descended carefully, testing each timber support before trusting their weight to the old wood. The shaft went down about 30 ft before leveling out into a small chamber. Someone had been working here. There were fresh picks on the walls, rock samples scattered on the ground, and a wooden crate half filled with ore. Elias picked up a piece of the ore and held it to the lantern light. Even in the dim illumination, he could see the telltale glitter of silver running through the rock. "Jesus." Haven breathed. "There's silver on my land. Not just silver. Look at this concentration. This could be rich." Elias set the ore down and picked up another piece. "Your father really didn't know." "If he did, he never said anything." "But that doesn't make sense. Why buy land with silver on it, and not work the claim. Maybe he didn't know. These survey stakes are from 67. Your father bought this section when? 72, I think. So the surveyor found it first, but something happened before he could file a claim or start mining. Haven looked around the chamber, and now Hartley knows about it, which explains everything. Elias said the pressure to sell, the fence cutting, the threats. He's not just after your water rights. He wants this silver. With his mining operations already in place just over the ridge, he could work this claim easy, but he needs your land to do it legally. So if I won't sell, he'll just take it by force. That's the play. Drive you off, have a friend in the territorial government deed the property to him for unpaid taxes or some such legal fiction, and then he owns one of the richest silver deposits in Nevada. Elias paced the small chamber, his mind working. The question is, how do we use this information? Haven was already thinking ahead. We filed the mineral claim ourselves, beat Hartley to it. Even if we don't work the mine, having the legal claim gives us leverage. Except Hartley probably has the claims office in his pocket too. We file, and the paperwork might mysteriously disappear. Then what? Elias thought for a moment, remembering his days as a marshal, the way legal battles were fought in the territories. We need witnesses, credible ones, and we need documentation that can't be questioned. If we can prove the silver exists, and that it's on your land, we can go to the territorial governor, maybe even the federal mining commissioner. That could take months. We don't have months. No, but we have 2 weeks. And if we can create enough legal uncertainty about the ownership of this claim, Hartley can't move on it without risking everything. He's a businessman first. He won't jeopardize his whole operation for one mine, no matter how rich. Haven picked up a piece of the silver ore, turning it over in her hands. My father used to say that fortune and misfortune were 2 sides of the same coin. I always thought this land was worthless, but it turns out it might be the most valuable thing I own. And that value might get me killed. Not if we're smart, not if we move fast. Elias took her arm gently. Come on. We've seen what we needed to see. Now we need to get this information to someone who can help us. They climbed back up the shaft and emerged into the late afternoon sunlight. The desert had never looked so threatening. Every shadow could hide one of Hartley's men. Every distant dust cloud could signal approaching riders. They'd stumbled onto something big, and that made them dangerous to a man who didn't tolerate threats. We ride hard for the ranch, Haven said, swinging into her saddle. Then we figure out our next move. But they'd only gone about a mile when Elias heard something that made his blood run cold. The distant crack of a rifle shot echoing off the rocks. Down, he shouted. They both dropped from their horses, using the animals as cover. Another shot rang out, this one close enough that Elias heard the bullet wind past. The horses spooked, dancing nervously, but too well trained to bolt entirely. Where's it coming from? Haven had her rifle out, scanning the landscape. Elias pointed to a rocky ridge about 300 YD to the west. Up there. At least one shooter, maybe more. Another shot. This one hit the ground near Haven's horse, making the animal rear. Haven grabbed the reins, keeping control, but their cover was compromised. We can't stay here, Elias said. They've got the high ground, and we're sitting ducks. There's an Awoke about 200 YD east. If we can reach it, then we run now. They mounted in a fluid motion, spurring their horses into a gallop. Immediately more shots rang out. 3, 4, 5 of them. A sustained barrage meant to kill or at least panic them into making a mistake. Elias heard one bullet pass so close to his head that he felt the displacement of air. Haven was ahead of him, bent low over her horse's neck, riding like she'd been born in the saddle. Elias followed, his borrowed horse responding gamely despite the gunfire. The Awoke appeared ahead, a deep cut in the earth that would provide cover. They reached it and plunged down the steep bank, their horses sliding on loose rock. At the bottom, they dismounted and took positions behind boulders, rifles ready. You hit? Elias asked. No, you. I'm good. He risked a quick look over the boulder. The ridge where the shots had come from was quiet now, but he could see movement. At least 2 men, maybe 3, repositioning. They're not giving up. Why would they? They probably followed us from the mine, saw us go down, saw us discover the silver. Haven checked her rifle, her hand steady despite the danger. They can't let us get back to the ranch with that information. Then they're going to be disappointed. The Awoke ran roughly north-south in the general direction of the ranch. If they could follow it for a mile or so, they might be able to break away without being seen. But the men on the ridge would anticipate that. We need to split up, Elias said. Absolutely not. Listen to me, they can't follow both of us. You take the Awoke north, ride hard for the ranch. I'll draw them off, lead them on a chase south, and then circle back. That's suicide. You don't know this land, and you're still recovering from nearly dying out here. I know enough, and I'm a better shot than you give me credit for. Elias met her eyes. The information about that mine has to get back to the ranch. Mateo needs to know, needs to be ready in case Hartley moves tonight. That's more important than both of us making it back. No, we stick together. Haven, I said no. Her voice was fierce. I didn't pull you out of this desert just to watch you ride back into it to die. We find another way. Before Elias could argue, a new sound cut through the air. Hoof beats coming fast from the north, both of them tensed, raising their rifles. Friend or enemy? No way to tell until Miss Haven. The voice was young, desperate. Miss Haven, where are you? That's Pete, Haven said, relief flooding her face. She stood and waved. Over here. Young Pete appeared on the rim of the Awoke, his horse elvered with sweat. Behind him rode Caleb, both men armed with rifles. Thank God we found you, Pete said, sliding down the bank. We heard shots, came as fast as we could. How did you know where we were? Elias asked. Caleb dismounted more slowly, his expression hard. Mateo sent us said you've been gone too long, and with Hartley's threats yesterday, he wanted to make sure you were all right. His eyes moved to the ridge. Seems like he was right to worry. There's at least 3 men up there, Haven said. They caught us coming back from the southern section. What were you doing that far south? Found something. Something big. Haven quickly explained about the mine, the silver, Hartley's men working the claim. Pete's eyes grew wider with each detail, while Caleb's expression grew darker. This changes everything, Caleb said when she finished. If Hartley knows we found it, he'll move tonight, Elias finished. He can't risk us filing that claim or going to the authorities. He'll hit the ranch, try to either kill us or drive us off permanently. Then we need to get back now. Caleb looked at the ridge. But they'll be waiting for us to run. So we don't run. We fight. Elias checked his ammunition. 4 of us, 3 of them. Better odds than we had a minute ago. Pete, you and Haven, take the horses and ride hard for the ranch. Caleb and I will keep these bastards busy. Then follow. I'm not leaving you, Haven started, but Elias cut her off. Yes, you are. Because you're the only one who can file that claim. The only one whose testimony will matter to the authorities. I'm nobody. Caleb and Pete are hired hands, but you're Sarah Lockhocke's daughter, and people in this territory remember your father. Your word carries weight. Mine doesn't. Haven looked like she wanted to argue, but the logic was inescapable. Finally, she nodded. All right? But you better make it back, Crowley. I didn't save your life just to have you throw it away the first chance you got. Yes, ma'am, Haven. Despite everything, the danger, the gunmen, the impossible situation, Elias smiled. Haven. She and Pete mounted up and rode north, staying low in the Awoke. Elias and Caleb watched them go, then turned their attention to the ridge. You really think you can file a claim fast enough to stop Hartley? Caleb asked. No, but I think we can create enough legal confusion to make him pause, and sometimes a pause is all you need. Elias moved to a better position behind a boulder. You're a good shot, good enough. Then let's show these hired guns that they picked the wrong people to ambush. They didn't have to wait long. The men on the ridge, seeing that Haven and Pete had escaped, decided to finish what they'd started. 3 riders came down from the high ground, approaching the Awoke with their rifles ready. Wait for my signal, Elias whispered. Let them get close. The riders were confident, probably thinking they had 2 men pinned down and helpless. They came within 100 yards, then 75. Elias could see their faces now. Hard men, professional guns, the kind Hartley would hire for wet work. Now, Elias shouted. He and Caleb fired simultaneously. Elias's shot took the lead rider in the shoulder, spinning him out of his saddle. Caleb's shot went wide, but spooked the horses, causing the other two riders to fight for control. The ambushers became the ambushed. The second rider got his rifle up and returned fire, but he was shooting from a panicked horse, and his shots went wild. Elias fired again, this time aiming for the horse itself. He hated to do it. The animal was innocent in all this, but he aimed low for the leg. The horse screamed and went down, throwing its rider hard. The third man was smarter. He wheeled his horse and galloped back toward the ridge, laying down, covering fire as he went. His bullets kicked up dust and rock around Elias and Caleb, forcing them to keep their heads down. "He's running," Caleb said. "Let him go. He'll report back to Hartley, which is fine. We want him to know we're not easy prey." They approached the two fallen riders carefully, rifles ready. The first man Elias had shot was conscious, but in no shape to fight, clutching his bleeding shoulder and cursing steadily. The second was unconscious, blood trickling from a head wound where he'd hit the ground. "What do we do with them?" Caleb asked. "Take their guns, their ammunition, and anything that might tell us who they are. Then we leave them. Someone will come back for them." Elias quickly searched the conscious man, finding a wallet with papers inside. "What's your name?" "Go to hell." Wrong answer. Elias pulled out the papers, letters, receipts, all addressed to a man named Jack Porter. "Jack Porter? That you?" The man spat blood. "What's it to you?" "It's leverage because now I know who you are, which means I can testify that you were out here shooting at us on Lucian Hartley's orders." "That's attempted murder, Jack. Territorial crime. They hang people for that." Porter's eyes widened slightly. "I was just paid to discourage you. Nobody said nothing about murder. You were shooting at us with rifles. What did you think would happen?" Elias pocketed the papers. "Tell Hartley his move failed. Tell him we found the mine and we're filing the claim. Tell him if he wants a war, we're ready to give him one. You're dead men. You know that, right? All of you. Hartley doesn't lose." "Everyone loses eventually," Elias said. "Come on, Caleb. Let's get back to the ranch." They mounted up and rode hard, following the Awoke until it petered out, then cutting cross-country toward the ranch. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in brilliant reds and oranges. Beautiful and terrible, like everything else in this unforgiving land. "Thank you," Caleb said after they'd been riding for a while. "For what you did back there, I misjudged you. You were protecting Haven. No need to thank me for that. Still, I thought you were just another drifter who'd bring trouble and leave. But you stood and fought. That counts for something." They reached the ranch just as full darkness fell. Haven was waiting in the yard, and the relief on her face when she saw them was almost painful in its intensity. "You made it," she said simply. "Had some doubts for a minute there, but yeah." Elias dismounted, his body reminding him that he was still recovering and probably shouldn't have been in a gunfight. "We need to talk, all of us now." Mateo gathered everyone in the main house, the ranch hands, Martha, even Carlos, who'd been working late in the barn. Haven stood by the fireplace and told them everything: the mine, the silver, Hartley's men, the ambush, the impossible situation they now found themselves in. When she finished, there was a long silence. "So we're at war," Mateo said finally. "No more pretending, no more hoping Hartley will back off. This is it." "Yes," Haven said, "and I understand if any of you want to leave. This isn't your fight, and I won't blame you for not wanting to risk your lives." "With respect, Miss Haven, that's horseshit," Carlos said quietly. Martha elbowed him for the language, but he continued, "This ranch is our home too. We've bled for it, sweated for it, built our lives here. If we run now, where do we go? How do we look at ourselves in the mirror?" "Carlos is right," Pete added. "We're with you all the way." Even Caleb nodded. "I had my doubts about bringing in a stranger, but Mr. Crowley proved himself today. If he says we can fight this, I'm willing to try." Elias felt something warm and unfamiliar in his chest, belonging maybe, or purpose. These people barely knew him, but they were willing to trust him with their lives, their homes, everything that mattered. He couldn't let them down. "All right," he said, "then here's what we do. Tomorrow first light, Haven and I ride to the county seat. We file that mining claim, and we do it publicly with witnesses. We make sure everyone knows there's silver on that land and that we found it first. Partly we'll have people there, Matteo warned. I'm counting on it. On the more public this is, the harder it is for him to make us disappear without questions being asked. Meanwhile, the rest of you fortify the ranch, double patrols, set up defensive positions, prepare for a siege if necessary. You really think he'll attack the ranch itself? Martha asked. I think he's desperate, and desperate men do desperate things. But if we can make this costly enough, public enough, he might back off. Rich men don't like risk, and we're about to make this very risky for him. They talked for another hour, planning, preparing, trying to anticipate every move Hartley might make. By the time they finished, it was past midnight, and exhaustion weighed on all of them. The others filed out to get what sleep they could before the morning. Haven walked Elias to the door of his room, lingering in the hallway. Thank you, she said, for staying, for fighting, for everything. Don't thank me yet. We've got a long way to go, and things are going to get worse before they get better. I know, but having you here, it makes me feel less alone, less afraid. She looked up at him, and in the lamplight her eyes were soft and vulnerable. I've been alone for so long, Elias. Since my father died, I've had to be strong to make all the decisions to carry everything by myself. And I was starting to break under the weight of it. Then you came along, and suddenly I don't have to carry it alone anymore. Elias felt the distance between them shrinking. Felt the pull of her presence like gravity. It would be easy to close that gap, to offer comfort in the oldest way humans knew. But something held him back. The knowledge that he was still a man with no home. That when this was over, he'd ride away. That letting this become more than it was would only hurt them both in the end. You're stronger than you think, he said instead. You would have fought this fight with or without me. I'm just helping even the odds a little. Haven smiled sadly, as if she knew exactly what he wasn't saying and why. Get some sleep, Elias. Tomorrow's going to be a hard day. Yeah, it is. She turned to leave, then paused. Elias? Yeah. When this is over, when we've beaten Hartley or driven him off, what will you do? It was the question he'd been avoiding thinking about. I don't know. Move on. I guess it's what I do. Maybe you could consider staying. The ranch could always use a good hand, and you seem to fit here. Haven, I know. I'm not asking for promises or commitments. I'm just saying the option will be there if you want it. She smiled again, warmer this time. Good night, Elias. Good night, Haven. He watched her walk away, her shadow dancing on the walls in the lamplight, and felt something twist in his chest. He told himself for years that he wasn't meant for settling down, that he was too restless, too damaged, too much of a wanderer to ever belong anywhere. But standing in that quiet hallway in a ranch house in the Nevada desert, he wondered if maybe he'd been lying to himself. If maybe what he'd been running from all these years wasn't trouble or commitment, but the fear of finding something worth staying for and then losing it. The way he'd lost everything else in his life, he shook his head, pushing the thoughts away. Tomorrow would bring enough troubles of its own. Tonight he needed rest, but sleep was a long time coming. And when it did, it brought dreams of silver mines and gunfire, of a woman with creek water eyes standing alone against the darkness, of choices made and opportunities lost. And through it all, the question haunted him. When this was over and the dust had settled, would he have the courage to stay? Or would he do what he'd always done? Ride away before anyone could get close enough to matter? Dawn came too quickly, painting the desert in shades of pink and gold that seemed almost cruel in their beauty. Elias stood on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching the sun break over the distant mountains, while his mind ran through everything that could go wrong today. The list was long and getting longer. Haven emerged from the house dressed for town, a simple but respectable dress, the color of sage, her hair pinned up in a way that made her look both businesslike and feminine. She'd strapped a small pistol to her thigh under the dress. He noticed the slight bulge barely visible if you weren't looking for it. Ready? She asked. As I'll ever be. Elias drained his coffee and set the cup aside. Matteo's got his orders. He does. The ranch is locked down tight, nobody in or out without his say-so, and everyone's armed. Haven's expression was tight with worry. I don't like leaving them here alone. They'll be fine. Hartley won't move in broad daylight. Not yet. He'll wait to see what we do in town first. Elias moved to where their horses stood saddled and ready. Besides, attacking the ranch while we're filing a mining claim would be the stupidest thing he could do. Even a bot sheriff would have to investigate that. You're putting a lot of faith in Hartley being smart. Not faith, experience. Rich men don't get rich by being stupid. Ruthless, yes. Willing to bend or break the law? Absolutely. But they calculate risk, and right now we're making this too risky for a direct assault. They mounted up and rode out, the early morning cool already beginning to surrender to the day's heat. Behind them, Matteo stood watching from the porch, his rifle cradled in his arms like a promise. The ride to the county seat took 3 hours, following a rough wagon road that wound through increasingly populated country. They passed other ranches, small farms, a stage station where they stopped briefly to water the horses. Everywhere they went, people stared, not hostile exactly, but wary. Word had clearly spread about the trouble at the Lock Ranch. "They're afraid," Haven said quietly as they rode away from the stage station. "Afraid to help, afraid to get involved. They've seen what happens to people who cross Hartley. Can't blame them. Most folks just want to live their lives, raise their kids, avoid trouble. Taking a stand against power takes a special kind of courage." Elias glanced at her. "The kind you've got. Or the kind of stubbornness my father passed down. Sometimes I can't tell the difference." They reached the county seat around mid-morning. It was a growing town, ambitious in the way frontier towns often were. Wide streets laid out for a population that didn't exist yet. Grand buildings, half-finished signs everywhere promising future prosperity. The territorial courthouse stood at the center of town, a 2-story brick building that looked solid and permanent compared to the wooden structures around it. "That's where we filed the claim," Haven said, pointing. "Recorder's office is on the first floor," but as they approached, Elias felt the hairs on the back of his neck prickle. Something was wrong. Too many men lounging around the courthouse steps, trying too hard to look casual. Too many eyes tracking their approach. "We've got company," he murmured. "I see them. Hartley's men, probably. Just keep moving. Act natural. We've got every right to be here." They hitched their horses and walked up the courthouse steps. The lounging men watched them pass, but didn't interfere. Not yet. Inside, the building was cooler with high ceilings and the musty smell of old papers and furniture oil. A clerk sat behind a desk, a nervous-looking man in his 40s with ink-stained fingers and the harried expression of someone caught between competing pressures. "Help you?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew exactly why they were there. "I'm Haven Locke. I'm here to file a mining claim on property in the southern section of my ranch." Haven's voice was clear and confident, pitched to carry. Several other people in the office looked up with interest. The clerk's expression grew even more uncomfortable. "I see. Well, you'll need to fill out the proper forms, and there's a filing fee, and then the claim has to be surveyed and verified before." "I'm aware of the process," Haven interrupted smoothly. "My father filed several claims in this office over the years. I have the survey coordinates here, along with samples of the ore." She produced a small leather bag from her satchel and set it on the desk with a heavy thunk. The clerk opened the bag, and his eyes widened slightly at the silver-laced ore inside. "This is quite rich." "Yes, it is. Which is why I want the claim filed today, with proper witnesses and documentation." Haven looked around the office pointedly. "I'm sure everyone here can attest that I followed all legal procedures." It was a smart move, Elias realized. By making the filing public and engaging witnesses, she was creating a record that would be harder for Hartley to erase or dispute. The clerk seemed to realize it too, and his discomfort increased. "Miss Lockhart, perhaps you should reconsider. Mining claims can be, complicated. There are existing operations in that area that might have prior rights, and legal challenges can be expensive and time-consuming. Are you refusing to accept my filing?" Haven's voice cut like a knife. "No, I just—" "Then please provide the necessary forms, unless there's some legal reason you can't, in which case I'd like to speak with your supervisor." The clerk swallowed hard, clearly caught between Hartley's pressure and the law's requirements. Finally, he pulled out a sheath of forms and slid them across the desk. "Fill these out, all of them, and the filing fee is $5. Haven began filling out the forms with steady, precise handwriting, while Elias stood watch, his hand never far from his gun. He could see more of Hartley's men gathering outside through the windows, and his unease grew. They were letting Haven file the claim, which meant Hartley had another play planned. "Done," Haven said, signing the last form with a flourish. She counted out $5 and placed them on the desk. "I'd like a receipt, please, and a stamped copy of the claim for my records." The clerk processed the paperwork with obvious reluctance, stamping each page as if it physically pained him. When he finally handed Haven her copies, his hand was shaking slightly. "The claim is filed, but Miss Lockhart, I really must advise you." "Your advice is noted and declined," Haven said crisply. She turned to the other people in the office. A lawyer, 2 clerks, a woman waiting to file some other paperwork. "You all witnessed this filing, correct? Miss Haven Locke filed a mining claim on property legally owned by the Locke Ranch, following all proper procedures." They nodded, some reluctantly, but they nodded. More witnesses, more protection. Haven was playing this perfectly. They left the courthouse and started back toward their horses. The men on the steps had multiplied. Now there were at least a dozen, and Brennan stood among them, his cold smile firmly in place. "Miss Lockhart," he said, stepping into their path, "congratulations on your filing, though I'm afraid it won't do you much good." "And why is that, Mr. Brennan?" "Because Mr. Hartley filed his own claim on that same property 3 days ago. Prior claim takes precedence, as I'm sure you know. Your filing is meaningless." Haven's face went pale, but her voice stayed steady. "That's impossible. That mine is on my land, and Hartley has no legal right to claim it. Actually, there's some dispute about where exactly your property line runs in that southern section. Mr. Hartley's surveyors have determined that the mine in question sits on public land adjacent to your ranch, not on your ranch itself." And since he filed first, Brennan's smile widened. "Well, I'm sure you can see the problem. It was a brilliant move," Elias had to admit. "Even if it was based on lies and falsified surveys, it would tie up the claim in legal challenges for months or years. And in the meantime, Hartley could work the mine while the court slowly ground toward a resolution." "Your surveyors are wrong," Haven said. "I have my father's original survey documents, which may be outdated or inaccurate. These things happen. That's why Mr. Hartley had the area reserve-eyed by certified professionals." Brennan produced a rolled document from his coat. "All properly filed and recorded, I assure you." 3 days ago, you said." Elias spoke for the first time, his voice thoughtful. "Interesting timing. Almost like Hartley knew about that mine before we found it." Brennan's eyes flickered to him, cold and measuring. "Mr. Hartley has surveyors working all over this territory. It's his business to know what minerals exist on what lands. Pure coincidence that his survey happened to cover that area." "Right. Coincidence?" Elias smiled without humor. "Like it was coincidence that your men were waiting at that mine yesterday to ambush us when we discovered it." The smile slipped from Brennan's face. "I don't know what you're talking about." "No, because I've got a man named Jack Porter who might say different. He's recovering from a gunshot wound right now, and I've got his papers, his gun, and his ammunition, all of which can tie him directly to Hartley's payroll." Elias took a step closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. "So, here's how this plays. You tell Hartley that his claim is fraudulent, and we can prove it. You tell him that if he wants to fight this in court, we'll fight and we'll bring up every illegal thing he's done to try and steal that land. The fence cutting, the poisoning, the intimidation, the attempted murder, all of it. You're bluffing. You have no proof, don't I? I've been a lawman in 3 territories, Brennan. I know how to build a case, and I've got witnesses, evidence, and a dead man's determination to see justice done." Elias's eyes were hard. "Your boss is rich and connected, but he's not invincible. Keep pushing, and we'll make this so public, so ugly, that even his bot officials won't be able to protect him." Brennan's hand moved toward his coat, and instantly Elias's hand was on his gun. Around them, Hartley's other men tensed, hands moving to weapons. For a long, breathless moment, the courthouse steps teetered on the edge of violence. Then, a new voice cut through the tension. "Gentlemen, I'd appreciate it if you didn't shoot each other on government property." A man emerged from the courthouse, tall and lean in his 60s, with a marshal's badge pinned to his vest. Elias recognized the type immediately: old-school lawman, the kind who'd survived decades in dangerous country by being smart, tough, and scrupulously fair. "Marshal Coughlin," Brennan said, forcing his hand away from his gun. "We were just having a conversation. Looked like more than that from where I stood." Coughlin's eyes moved to Elias, sharp and assessing. "You're the man staying at the Lock Ranch." "Crowley, is it?" "That's right. And you're the territorial marshal I've been hearing about. They say you're one of the few honest lawmen left in Nevada. They say a lot of things, not all of them true." Coughlin glanced at Haven. "Miss Lockhart, I was sorry to hear about your father. He was a good man." "Thank you, Marshal. He spoke highly of you as well. I heard you just filed a mining claim. Also heard that Mr. Hartley filed one on the same property a few days back." Coughlin's tone was carefully neutral. "Seems like a matter for the courts to sort out." "It would be," Elias said, "except Hartley's claim is based on fraudulent surveys designed to steal land he couldn't buy. And when we discovered the mine, his men tried to kill us to keep us quiet. That's a serious accusation. It's the truth. I've got evidence, witnesses, and a wounded man who will testify once he realizes that attempted murder charges carry a noose." Coughlin was quiet for a moment, studying them both. Then he said, "Mr. Brennan, I think you and your men should move along. This conversation's over. The marshal doesn't have jurisdiction over civil disputes." Brennan started. "No, but I do have jurisdiction over public safety and preventing violence. And right now, I'm seeing a situation that could turn ugly real fast, so I'm asking you nicely to disperse. Don't make me ask twice." Brennan's jaw tightened, but he nodded curtly. "Well, be going, but this isn't over, Crowley. Not by a long shot." He and his men withdrew, moving down the street toward a saloon, but their eyes never left Elias and Haven. After they were gone, Coughlin turned back to them. "Walk with me." They followed him down the street to a small restaurant where he led them to a back table away from other patrons. After they had ordered coffee, Coughlin leaned back in his chair and studied Elias with those sharp old eyes. "You said you've been a lawman." "Where?" "Kansas, Wyoming Territory, New Mexico. Mostly range detective work and town marshal positions." "Why do you stop?" "Politics, corruption, the usual reasons good men quit wearing badges." Elias met his gaze steadily. "But I never stopped believing in the law, even when the law stopped believing in itself." "I know the feeling." Coughlin sipped his coffee. "I've been marshal in this territory for 15 years. Watched it grow from nothing to something, watched good people build communities and raise families. And I've watched men like Lucien Hartley come in and try to turn it all into their own private kingdoms." "Then help us stop him," Haven said urgently. "You have the authority. I have authority over federal crimes and territorial matters. Disputed mining claims are civil issues outside my jurisdiction. If I overstep, every judge Hartley owns will slap me down, and I'll lose what little power I have to do actual good." Coughlin's expression was sympathetic, but firm. "I'm sorry, Miss Lockhart, but my hands are tied on this one. So we're on our own. Legally, yes, but I can offer some advice off the record." Coughlin leaned forward. "Partly smart, but he's also arrogant. He's built his empire on the assumption that the law will always protect him, that his money and connections make him untouchable. But every empire has cracks, and arrogance makes men careless. Find those cracks. Exploit them." "How?" Elias asked. "Partly's mining operations. They're profitable, but they're also barely legal in some cases. Environmental violations, safety issues, labor practices that skirt the edge of federal law. If someone were to document those violations and bring them to the attention of the Federal Mining Commission," Coughlin shrugged. "Well, that's federal jurisdiction, something I could get involved with." Understanding dawned in Elias's mind. "You're saying if we can tie Hartley's attempt to steal the Lock property to his other illegal activities, you could move on him?" "I'm saying that a pattern of criminal behavior is harder to ignore than isolated incidents. Build me a case that shows Hartley's entire operation is corrupt, and I'll have grounds to investigate. And once I start investigating, his bot officials can't stop me without revealing themselves as corrupt too." Coughlin finished his coffee. But you'd need evidence. Real evidence, not just accusations. Where would we find that evidence? Haven asked. Hartley's main mining office is here in town. He keeps records there. Payroll, equipment manifests, correspondence. If you could access those records, Coughlin stood. But of course, I'm not suggesting anything illegal. I'm just a tired old marshal having coffee with concerned citizens. He left money on the table and walked out, leaving Elias and Haven staring at each other. He's telling us to break into Hartley's office, Haven said quietly. That's how I heard it too. Elias's mind was already working, planning. It's a risk. If we're caught, Hartley could have us arrested for burglary and all the sympathy we've built up disappears. But if we succeed, we could end this. Really end it. Not just delay the inevitable. Maybe. Or maybe we get caught and make everything worse. Elias studied her face. This is your call, Haven. It's your ranch, your life. I'll follow your lead. Haven was quiet for a long moment, staring into her coffee cup as if it held answers. Then she looked up and her eyes were clear and determined. My father used to say that sometimes doing the right thing means breaking the rules. He never meant it like this, but I think he'd understand. We can't win playing by rules that Hartley's already bought and paid for. Then we do it tonight. Scout the office this afternoon, wait for full dark, and get in and out fast. What about the ranch? If something goes wrong, Mateo can hold the fort for one night, and if we succeed, the ranch won't need defending anymore. Elias reached across the table and took her hand. But Haven, you need to understand. If this goes bad, you could lose everything. The ranch, your freedom, maybe your life. Are you sure you want to risk that? Her hand tightened on his. I'm already risking everything just by standing up to Hartley. At least this way, we're taking the fight to him instead of just waiting for him to destroy us. She smiled, sad and brave. Besides, you'll be with me. That makes me feel like we might actually pull this off. They spent the afternoon casually exploring the town, memorizing layouts and routines while trying not to draw attention. Hartley's mining office occupied the ground floor of a two-story building on the edge of the business district. Guards rotated shifts every 4 hours, and a clerk worked until 6 hours in the evening. After that, the building appeared empty until the morning. There's a back entrance, Elias noted as they walked past for the third time. Probably for deliveries. Lock looks old. I can pick it. When did you learn to pick locks? Range detective work. You'd be surprised what skills come in handy when you're investigating cattle theft and fraud. He steered them toward a general store. We'll need a few supplies. Dark clothes, a good lantern with a shade, something to carry documents in. They purchased what they needed with cash, avoiding questions by pretending to be outfitting for a camping trip. By the time evening fell, they were as ready as they could be. They ate dinner at a boarding house, then retired to the room they'd rented. Separate beds, proper and respectable, though the landlord gave them a skeptical look. As darkness settled over the town and the streets emptied, they changed into their dark clothes and prepared to move. Scared, Elias asked as they waited for the town to fully quiet. Terrified, Haven admitted, but also excited. Is that wrong? We're about to commit a crime, and part of me feels more alive than I have in months. Not wrong, just human. There's a reason outlaws keep being outlaws. The risk, the danger. It makes you feel real in a way normal life doesn't. Elias checked his gun, making sure it was loaded. But don't let that feeling make you careless. We're doing this because we have to, not because we want to. I know, but still. She smiled at him in the darkness. It feels good to be doing something instead of just reacting. They slipped out of the boarding house through a back window, moving through the dark streets like shadows. The moon was only a sliver, which helped conceal them, but made navigation harder. They reached Hartley's office without incident and crouched in the alley behind it, listening. No sounds from inside, no guards visible. Elias approached the back door and examined the lock by touch. Old brass standard pin tumbler. He pulled 2 pieces of bent wire from his pocket and went to work. It took 3 minutes of delicate manipulation before he felt the pins align and the lock turn. The door swung open silently and they slipped inside. The office was dark and musty, smelling of paper and cigar smoke. Elias lit their shaded lantern, keeping the light low and directed. They were in a storage room with crates and filing cabinets lining the walls. Beyond it, a doorway led to the main office. "Start here," Elias whispered. "Look for anything with payroll records, employee names, equipment purchases, anything that might show illegal activity." They worked quickly and quietly, rifling through drawers and cabinets with practiced efficiency. Haven found a ledger that detailed payments to various workers, including several names Elias recognized from the ambush. Porter was there along with Brennan and a dozen others. "This is good," Elias said, photographing the relevant pages in his memory. "But we need more. We need evidence of environmental violations, safety issues." A sound from outside froze them both. Footsteps on the boardwalk accompanied by voices. The voices were getting closer. "Check the office. Make sure everything's secure. Boss is paranoid after what happened today." Hartley's men doing a security sweep. Elias grabbed Haven's arm and pulled her deeper into the office, looking for a place to hide. There, a large storage closet, half full of old ledgers and supplies. They squeezed inside and pulled the door almost shut, leaving just a crack to see through. The back door rattled as someone tested it, then swung open. Two men entered, one carrying a lantern. They were armed and alert, clearly taking their job seriously. "Check the files," one said. "Make sure nothing's been disturbed." They moved through the storage room, and Elias felt Haven press against him in the confined space, her breathing quick and quiet. He put his arm around her shoulders, partly for comfort and partly to keep her still. Through the crack in the closet door, he watched the guards check the cabinets they'd just been searching. "Looks fine. Nothing out of place." "Good. Boss would have our hides if someone broke in here. There's too much sensitive information." "What's he so worried about anyway? Lockwoman's not going to find anything that helps her. Don't underestimate her or that drifter she's got helping her. Brennan says the guy used to be law, could be trouble. What's Hartley planning to do about them? Same thing he always does. Make them an offer they can't refuse, and if they still refuse, make them disappear. Give it another week and the Lock Ranch will be his." The casual way they discussed murder made Elias's blood run cold. These weren't just hired guns. They were murderers in waiting. And Haven was their target. The guards finished their inspection and left, locking the back door behind them. Elias and Haven waited in the closet for another 5 minutes, making sure they were really gone before emerging. "You heard them," Haven whispered, her voice shaking. "A week. That's all the time we have. Then we work faster. Come on, we need to finish this." They searched with renewed urgency, pulling out files and ledgers, looking for the smoking gun that would bring Hartley down. And finally, in a locked drawer that Elias had to pick open, they found it. A leather-bound journal written in Hartley's own hand, detailing years of illegal activities. Bribes to officials with names and amounts. Safety violations at his mines that had resulted in worker deaths covered up with payoffs to families and doctors. Environmental damage to streams and land, poisoning water sources just like he'd done to Haven's ranch. And there, near the end, plans for acquiring the Lock property, including explicit instructions to remove obstacles by any means necessary. "This is it," Elias breathed. "This is everything we need. Coughlin can take this to the federal authorities, and Hartley's finished. We need to copy it. If we take the original and he notices, no time to copy everything. We take the whole thing and get out now. He might not notice it's missing for days, and by then it'll be too late." They stuffed the journal into Haven's satchel along with several other incriminating documents. Then they doused the lantern and moved toward the back door. Elias picked the lock from the inside, easing the door open. The alley was empty. They slipped out and he relocked the door behind them, hoping to buy a few more hours before the theft was discovered. They'd made it halfway down the alley when a voice stopped them cold. Well, what do we have here?" Brennan stepped out of the shadows at the alley's mouth, flanked by 4 armed men. His gun was already drawn, pointed directly at Elias's chest. "Breaking and entering, theft, conspiracy. That's a lot of charges, Miss Lockhart. Mr. Hartley is going to be very disappointed in you." Elias's mind raced, calculating angles and odds. 5 men, all armed against him and Haven. She had her pistol, but she'd never even drawn it before. Fighting would get them both killed. "How did you know?" Haven asked, her voice admirably steady. "We didn't. But after your little performance at the courthouse, Mr. Hartley figured you might try something desperate. So I've had men watching his offices all day, rotating positions to stay inconspicuous." Brennan smiled that cold smile. "You walked right into our trap. You can't prove we took anything," Elias said. "Don't need to prove it. Just need to hold you long enough for the sheriff to arrive, search you, and find Mr. Hartley's property in your possession." Brennan gestured with his gun. "Now, both of you drop your weapons slowly." Elias's hand moved toward his gun, but not to drop it. He was calculating, planning, looking for any opening. If he could draw fast enough, take out Brennan first, create enough confusion for Haven to run. "Don't even think about it, Crowley," Brennan warned. "You might get me, might even get one of my men, but the others will gun you down and then miss Lockhart. Is that really how you want this to end?" He was right. Damn him. Elias couldn't see a way out that didn't end with Haven dead. His hand stopped, hovering near his gun. "That's better. Now drop." The shot came from behind Brennan, so unexpected that everyone froze for a critical second. One of Brennan's men dropped, clutching his shoulder. Then more shots, a fusillade of gunfire from the rooftops and windows surrounding the alley. "Federal Marshal, drop your weapons." It was Coughlin's voice, backed by at least half a dozen deputies. Brennan and his men found themselves caught in a crossfire, surrounded by lawmen with rifles. "Drop them now or I drop you," Coughlin called. For a moment, Brennan looked like he might fight anyway, desperation and rage warring in his expression. Then slowly, he lowered his gun and let it fall. His men followed suit. Deputies swarmed into the alley, securing Brennan and his men, while Coughlin approached Elias and Haven. The old marshal's face was grim. "You two are damned lucky I decided to keep an eye on you tonight." Another 10 seconds, and this would have ended very differently. "How did you know?" Haven started. "Because I've been doing this job long enough to recognize people who are about to do something reckless and stupid." Coughlin held out his hand. "Whatever you took from that office, give it to me now. Make it official evidence instead of stolen property." Elias and Haven exchanged glances. Then Haven pulled the journal and documents from her satchel and handed them over. Coughlin flipped through the journal, his expression growing darker with each page. "Sweet Jesus," he muttered, "partly documented everything. The man's either incredibly stupid or incredibly arrogant." "Can you use it?" Elias asked. "Use it? This is enough to hang him twice over. Bribery of federal officials, illegal mining practices, conspiracy to commit murder." Coughlin closed the journal with a snap. "I'll have federal warrants issued by tomorrow morning. Hartley won't know what hit him." "He'll run," Brennan said from where the deputies held him. "Son, as he hears about this, he'll disappear. He's got resources, connections." "Then I'd better move fast." Coughlin turned to his deputies. "Take these men to the territorial jail. Charges are conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, and about a dozen other things I'll think of on the way. And send word to every telegraph office in Nevada. Nobody named Lucian Hartley gets on a train or a stage without me knowing about it." As the deputies hauled Brennan and his men away, Coughlin turned back to Elias and Haven. "You two get out of town tonight. Go back to your ranch and stay there. When I move on Hartley, things are going to get ugly, and I don't want you anywhere near it." "But," Haven started, "that's not a request, Miss Lockhart. You've done your part. Now let the law do its job." His expression softened slightly. "You've got courage. I'll give you that. Your father would be proud, but courage without sense gets people killed. Go home. Protect your people. And trust that justice, slow as it is, will catch up to Hartley eventually." They didn't argue. Within the hour, they were riding out of town, the journal and documents safely in Marshal Coughlin's custody. Behind them, the county seat was alive with activity. Deputies mobilizing, telegraph wires humming, the machinery of federal law grinding into motion. The ride back to the ranch was long and quiet, both of them processing what had happened. They'd gone from hunted to hunters, from desperate to hopeful, all in the space of a few hours. It felt surreal, like they might wake up and find it was all a dream. Do you think Coughlin will actually arrest Hartley? Haven asked as they rode through the pre-dawn darkness. I think he'll try. Whether he succeeds depends on how fast Hartley moves and how deep his corruption goes. Elias looked at her. But we've given Coughlin the tools he needs. The rest is out of our hands. I don't like things being out of my hands. I know, but sometimes you have to trust other people to do their jobs. Coughlin's a good lawman. He'll do right by us. They reached the ranch just as the sun was breaking over the horizon, painting the desert in those familiar shades of pink and gold. Mateo was waiting in the yard, and the relief on his face when he saw them was palpable. Thank God, he said. When you didn't come back last night, I thought it's a long story, Haven said, dismounting stiffly. But the short version is we found evidence of Hartley's crimes. The federal marshal has it now, and warrants are being issued. It might actually be over. Might be. Hartley's still free, and he's dangerous. Until Coughlin arrests him, we stay on guard. Elias climbed down from his horse, every muscle aching. But, for the first time since I got here, I think we're going to win this. The next 2 days were tense and strange. They went about the ranch work, maintaining the heightened security Mateo had implemented. But there was an undercurrent of hope now that hadn't existed before. News filtered in through travelers and the occasional rider. Hartley's office had been raided, his records seized, his men arrested by the dozen. The man himself had vanished, some said to California, others to Mexico. But on the third day, Marshal Coughlin himself rode up to the ranch, and the expression on his face told them everything before he even spoke. We got him, he said simply, arrested him trying to board a train in Carson City. He's in custody now, awaiting federal trial. The relief that washed over Haven nearly brought her to her knees. Elias steadied her with a hand on her arm, and she gripped it hard enough to hurt. It's really over, she asked, voice shaking. The immediate threat is over. There'll be a trial, and Hartley's got lawyers who will drag it out as long as possible. But with the evidence in that journal, conviction is almost certain. He's going to prison for a long time, Miss Lockhart, and his mining empire is being broken up and sold to pay restitution to the people he hurt. Coughlin smiled, tired but satisfied. Your ranch is safe. You're safe. After Coughlin left, Haven walked out to the porch and just stood there, staring at her land as if seeing it for the first time. Elias followed and stood beside her, not touching, just being present. I can't believe it, she said finally. All these months of being afraid, of wondering if every day would be the last, and now it's just over. What do I do now? You live, Elias said simply. You run your ranch. You take care of your people. You build the life your father wanted for you. That's what you do. Haven turned to look at him, and there were tears in her eyes. We couldn't have done this without you. You know that, right? If you hadn't been here, if you hadn't helped, you would have found another way. You're stronger than you think, Havenlock. Maybe, but I'm glad I didn't have to find out. She took his hand, lacing their fingers together. So what about you? What do you do now? It was the question Elias had been avoiding, the one he knew was coming, but wasn't ready to answer. Because the answer was simple and terrible. He'd promised himself he'd leave when this was over. He told her from the beginning he wasn't looking for a home, that he was just helping because it was the right thing to do. But standing there on that porch, her hand in his, looking out at the land they'd fought for together, leaving felt impossible. I don't know, he admitted. For the first time in a long time, I honestly don't know. Haven squeezed his hand, and when she smiled, it was sad and hopeful all at once. Well, when you figure it out, let me know because the offer still stands. The ranch could use a good hand, and you're the best I've ever seen. Haven, I'm not asking for forever, Elias. I'm just asking you to think about it. To consider that maybe you've been running for so long, you've forgotten what it's like to stand still. She released his hand and turned to go back inside. Whatever you decide, do it for the right reasons. Not because you're afraid, and not because you think you owe me something, but because it's what you actually want. She left him there, and Elias stood alone on the porch as the sun climbed higher, wrestling with the hardest decision he'd faced in years. Stay or go, build something or keep drifting, risk his heart or protect it. The choice should have been easy. He'd been making the same choice his whole adult life. Move on. Don't get attached. Don't let anyone get close enough to hurt you. But this time, the choice felt different. This time, leaving would hurt just as much as staying. And for the first time, Elias Crowley allowed himself to wonder if maybe, just maybe, he'd finally found something worth the risk. 3 days passed in a strange kind of peace that Elias didn't quite know how to navigate. The ranch settled back into its rhythms, cattle to tend, fences to mend, the endless cycle of work that defined life in the desert. But everything felt different now, lighter somehow, as if a weight that had been pressing down on all of them had finally lifted. Mateo smiled more. Martha hummed while she cooked. Even Caleb seemed less suspicious, treating Elias with something approaching friendship. They'd fought together, bled together, and that created bonds that couldn't be easily broken. But Elias felt those bonds like chains, beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Every morning he woke intending to saddle his horse and ride out. Every evening he found another reason to stay, just one more day. He was fixing a section of corral fence when Haven found him on the fourth afternoon. She'd been giving him space, he realized, letting him work through whatever internal battle he was fighting without pressure. But now she walked up with 2 cups of coffee and a determined expression that told him the grace period was over. "We need to talk," she said, handing him a cup. "Yeah, I know." Elias set down his hammer and accepted the coffee, grateful for something to do with his hands. "You're planning to leave?" It wasn't a question, but he answered anyway. "I'm thinking about it." "Why?" Haven's voice was calm, but he could hear the hurt underneath. "Hartley's gone. The ranch is safe. There's work here if you want it. Good work, honest work. Why would you leave?" "Because it's what I do. It's who I am." Elias stared into his coffee cup, searching for words that didn't sound like excuses. "I've never stayed anywhere longer than a few months, Haven. Never put down roots. Never let myself get attached. Every time I've tried, it's ended badly. So, you run before it can end badly again." "I'm trying to be smart, trying to protect both of us from something that won't work." Haven was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice was sharp with frustration. "You know what I think? I think you're scared. I think you'd rather run than risk actually being happy. Because being happy means you could lose it, and losing it would hurt worse than never having it at all." The words hit harder because they were true. Elias felt something crack in his chest. All the defenses he'd built over years of drifting suddenly feeling paper thin. "You're right," he admitted. "I am scared. Terrified actually because every person I've ever cared about has either left me or died. And I don't know how to be the kind of man who stays. I don't know how to build something permanent when everything in my life has been temporary. So learn, stay, and learn." Haven moved closer, and the intensity in her eyes pinned him in place. "I'm not asking you to have all the answers right now, Elias. I'm just asking you to try to give us a real chance instead of running away because it might not work. And what if I fail? What if I stay and it falls apart and I end up hurting you worse than if I just left now? Then at least we tried. At least we gave ourselves the chance to be happy instead of protecting ourselves from hypothetical pain." She reached out and took his hand, and her touch was warm and solid and real. "I've spent the last 6 months being scared, Elias. Scared I'd lose the ranch, scared I'd fail my father's legacy, scared I'd end up alone and broken. And then you showed up. This half-dead stranger I pulled out of the desert, and you reminded me that some things are worth being scared for." Elias looked down at their joined hands, feeling the calluses on her palm that matched his own, the strength in her fingers. This woman who'd saved his life, who'd fought beside him, who'd risked everything for what was right. She was offering him something he'd never thought he'd have. A home, a purpose, a future that stretched beyond the next town, the next job, the next lonely mile. All he had to do was be brave enough to take it. "I don't even know if I remember how to stay," he said quietly. "I might wake up one morning and the road will call too loud and I'll just go. I might disappoint you, or you might not. That's the thing about the future, Elias. We don't know what's coming. We can't control it, can't predict it. All we can do is decide what we want and then fight like hell to make it happen." Haven's voice softened. "I want you to stay. I want to see where this goes. What we could build together, but I need you to want it too. Not just agree to it because you feel obligated. It's not obligation. The words came out rougher than he intended. These past few weeks, working this ranch, being part of something bigger than myself, it's been the best I've felt in years. And you, Godhaven, you make me want to believe in things I stopped believing in a long time ago. Then stay. Please, just stay. The plea in her voice broke something open in him, all the walls he'd built crumbling like old adobe in the rain. He pulled her into his arms, and she came willingly, fitting against him like she'd been made for exactly that spot. They stood there in the afternoon sunlight, holding each other, while the desert wind whispered around them, and somewhere a horse nickered softly in the corral. "All right," Elias said into her hair. "I'll stay. I don't know if I'll be any good at it, but I'll try." He felt her smile against his chest. "That's all I'm asking for. Just try." When they pulled apart, both of them were smiling, tentative and hopeful. Haven reached up and touched his face, her fingers tracing the scar on his jaw that he'd gotten in some bar fight years ago. "We should probably tell the others," she said before they place bets on whether you're going to run off in the middle of the night. "They're betting on that. Pete and Carlos have money on you leaving by the end of the week. Mateo's giving you another month. Martha says you'll stay forever, but she's a romantic." Haven grinned. "I didn't bet. Seemed like bad luck. Smart woman." Elias caught her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm, a gesture that felt both natural and terrifying in its intimacy. "Let's tell them at dinner. Make it official." That evening they gathered in the main house for one of Martha's legendary meals. Roasted chicken, fresh bread, vegetables from the garden she'd coaxed into existence. Despite the harsh climate, everyone sensed something was different. The way people do when the air carries change like static before a storm. Mateo was the first to speak, studying them with those sharp old eyes. "You two look like you've come to some kind of understanding." "We have," Haven said, and Elias heard the happiness in her voice, bright and unguarded. "Elias has agreed to stay on permanently as foreman if he'll accept the position." The silence that followed was heavy with surprise and something else. Hope, maybe, or relief. Then Martha let out a whoop of joy that made everyone jump. "I knew it. Carlos, you owe me $5. I told you he'd stay." The bet was whether he'd stay forever, not whether he'd stay now, Carlos protested. But he was smiling as he pulled out a worn leather wallet. "Still, I'm happy to lose this one." Mateo stood and extended his hand to Elias, his expression serious but warm. "You've earned this, Crowley. You fought for this place like it was your own, and as far as I'm concerned, that makes you family. I'll be proud to work alongside you." The word family hit Elias harder than he expected, emotion tightening his throat. He shook Mateo's hand, then Pete's, then Carlos's, each grip a promise and an acceptance. This was real. He was staying. He had a home. The rest of the evening passed in celebration and planning. Mateo was ready to step back from some of the foreman duties. His knees weren't what they used to be, he admitted, and he'd welcome someone younger taking on the harder work. They discussed expanding the herd, maybe hiring another hand or two, now that money wouldn't be quite so tight. Carlos talked about breeding a new line of horses, something he'd been wanting to try for years. And through it all, Elias felt Haven's presence beside him. Solid and sure, her hand occasionally finding his under the table in a touch that was both thrilling and comforting. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, they sat on the porch together, watching the stars wheel overhead. The desert was alive with small sounds, insects, distant coyotes, the wind moving through the sage. Elias had his arm around Haven's shoulders, and she leaned into him with a contentment that made him feel 10 ft tall. "I still can't quite believe you're staying," she said softly. "Part of me keeps waiting to wake up and find out this was all a dream." "I'm staying," Elias promised. "I'm done running Haven, done letting fear make my decisions. This is where I want to be with you." She turned in his arms to face him, and in the starlight, her eyes were luminous. "I should warn you, I'm not easy to live with. I'm stubborn and proud, and I have very specific ideas about how this ranch should be run. I'm moody and restless, and I've got enough demons in my past to fill a small town," Elias countered. "We're probably going to fight." Probably. And I'm going to mess up, make mistakes, do things wrong. Me too. But I want to try anyway. Want to see if we can build something good here. Something that lasts. He kept her face in his hands, marveling at the trust he saw there. I want to try being happy, Haven. With you. Then kiss me, you fool, she whispered, before I lose my nerve and start listing all the practical reasons this is a terrible idea. He kissed her, and it felt like coming home and starting an adventure all at the same time. Her lips were soft and warm, and she kissed him back with an enthusiasm that made his heart race. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Elias was grinning like an idiot. That was, he started. Yeah, Haven agreed, equally stunned. It really was. They sat there in comfortable silence, her head on his shoulder, his arms around her, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, Elias felt at peace. The restlessness that had driven him from town to town, territory to territory, was quiet now, replaced by something warmer and more sustaining. Purpose, belonging, home. The weeks that followed fell into a pattern that was both familiar and entirely new. Elias stepped into his role as foreman with a mixture of confidence and humility, relying on Mateo's experience while slowly putting his own stamp on how things were run. He reorganized the patrol routes, improved the water management system, and started training the younger horses with techniques he'd learned from his grandfather decades ago. But it was the small moments that really changed him. Morning coffee with Haven on the porch while they planned the day's work. Evenings spent playing cards with the hands, listening to their stories and slowly becoming part of the fabric of their lives. Sundays when they'd all gather for Martha's elaborate dinners and the conversation would flow easy and warm, punctuated by laughter. He was building a life piece by piece, day by day. And it was good. Haven bloomed under the new circumstances, the constant fear and stress melting away to reveal the woman she'd been before Hartley's threats had worn her down. She laughed more, smiled easier, and threw herself into expanding the ranch with an enthusiasm that was infectious. Together, they started planning for the future. New wells to dig, pastures to improve, maybe even working that silver mine legally once all the legal complications with Hartley's claim were sorted out. One evening, about 6 weeks after he'd agreed to stay, Elias was helping Carlos with a difficult horse when Pete came running from the house, excitement written all over his young face. "Mr. Crowley, there's a telegram for you. Ryder just brought it from town." Elias's stomach tightened with old instincts. Telegrams, in his experience, usually meant trouble. He wiped his hands on his pants and took the thin yellow paper, unfolding it with trepidation. It was from Marshal Coughlin, and it was brief. "Partly convicted, 20 years hard labor. Your testimony was crucial. Thank you for your service. Position open if you want it. Coughlin." Elias read it twice, processing. Hartley was convicted, really and truly finished. The threat was over permanently, and Coughlin was offering him a job, probably as a deputy marshal. The kind of position Elias had once dreamed of holding. The old him would have jumped at the chance. Federal marshal's deputy, working under a good man, doing important work. It was everything he'd wanted before politics and corruption had soured him on the badge. But now, standing in the Nevada sunshine, with horse sweat on his clothes and dirt under his nails, the offer felt like an echo from another life, a life he had already left behind. Haven appeared from the house, drawn by Pete's excitement. She saw the telegram in his hand, and her expression grew cautious. "What is it?" "Hartley's convicted. 20 years. He handed her the telegram. "And Coughlin's offering me a job. Deputy Marshal." He watched her read it, watched the emotions play across her face, relief at the news about Hartley. Then something more complicated as she processed the job offer. When she looked up, her eyes were guarded. That's wonderful about Hartley, I mean. And the job offer. That's a real honor. Coughlin doesn't make offers like that lightly." "No, he doesn't." Elias moved closer, taking her hands. "Haven, I'm not going to take it." "What?" "But I've got a job right here, and it's better than anything Coughlin could offer me because it comes with you." He pulled her into his arms, feeling the tension in her body slowly ease. "I told you I was done running, and I meant it. My place is here with you on this ranch." Haven's eyes were bright with tears she was trying not to shed. "Are you sure?" Because if this is what you really want, I'm sure. More sure than I've been about anything in my life. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, finally her lips. You're what I want, Haven. This life we're building, I'm not giving that up for anything. She kissed him back hard, and when they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling through tears. I love you, she said, the words tumbling out as if she couldn't hold them back any longer. I've been trying not to say it, trying to give you space and time. But I love you, Elias Crowley. I love your stubborn honor and your wounded heart, and the way you always do the right thing, even when it costs you. I love you too, he said, and hearing himself say it, feeling the truth of it, was like stepping into sunlight after years in shadow. I think I started loving you the moment you poured water on my lips in the desert and told me to stay with you. I've been trying to catch up to that moment ever since. They held each other while the sun sank toward the horizon and the ranch continued its work around them. Carlos discreetly herded Pete away to give them privacy, and Mateo smiled from the barn door before turning back to his tasks. That night they sent a telegram back to Coughlin. Grateful for the offer, but I found my place. Good luck, Crowley. The response came the next day, brief and warm. Congratulations on your retirement, Deputy. May it be long and happy, Coughlin. Summer turned to fall, and the desert transformed in subtle ways. The brutal heat mellowing to warmth, the light taking on that golden quality that made everything look painted. The cattle fattened on the last of the good grass before winter. The horses grew their winter coats, and Elias settled deeper into his new life, feeling the restlessness that had defined him for so long fade to nothing. He and Haven fell into a relationship that was both passionate and practical, built on mutual respect and shared purpose as much as attraction. They worked side by side during the day and spent evenings planning, dreaming, building toward a future that felt solid and real. But there was one conversation they kept dancing around, both of them aware of it, but neither quite ready to initiate. Finally, on a cool October evening, as they sat on the porch watching the first stars appear, Haven took a deep breath and dove in. Elias, where do you see this going? Us, I mean. He'd been expecting the question, had been thinking about it for weeks. I see it going wherever you want it to go. I'm not going anywhere, if that's what you're asking. That's not quite what I'm asking. She turned to face him, her expression serious. I'm 30 years old, Elias. I've spent the last 6 months fighting just to survive, and before that, I spent years taking care of my father as he slowly gave up on life. I don't have time to waste on something that's not going anywhere. What do you want from me, Haven? Just say it plain. I want to know if you're interested in marriage, in building a real future together, not just working together and sharing a bed when it's convenient. I want to know if you can see yourself being my husband, being a father to the children I'd like to have someday. Her voice was steady, but he could hear the vulnerability underneath. Because if you can't, I need to know now before I fall any deeper. Elias looked at her, this strong, brave, beautiful woman who'd saved his life in more ways than one, and felt certainty settle over him like a warm blanket. I can see it, he said, all of it. Marriage, kids, growing old together on this ranch. I want all of that with you, Haven. I've just been waiting for the right moment to ask. Ask what? He stood and pulled her to her feet, then dropped to one knee right there on the porch, where they'd had so many conversations, where they'd planned and dreamed and fallen in love. Haven Locke, you are the bravest, most stubborn, most wonderful woman I've ever known. You saved my life when I was dying in the desert, and you've been saving it every day since. I love you more than I thought I could love anything, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving that to you. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the ring he'd been carrying for 2 weeks, waiting for courage. It was simple, a gold band with a small diamond that had cost him most of his savings, but it was honest and real, like everything between them. Will you marry me? Haven's hands flew to her mouth and tears spilled down her cheeks. You had a ring. You've been carrying a ring. Bought it in town 3 weeks ago. Been waiting for the right moment, but I guess you got tired of waiting for me to find my nerve. You beautiful fool. She dropped to her knees in front of him and kissed him hard. Yes. Yes, I'll marry you. I'll marry you tomorrow if we can find a preacher. Tomorrow might be rushing it, Elias said, laughing. But soon, as soon as we can make it happen. They kissed again, and somewhere in the house they heard a cheer. Martha, probably, who had a habit of eavesdropping on important moments. Within minutes, the whole household had gathered on the porch, congratulating them with hugs and backslaps and tears. Matteo shook Elias's hand with a grip that conveyed approval and warning in equal measure. "You take care of her, you hear? She's the best thing in all our lives." "I know, I will, I promise." Carlos produced a bottle of whiskey he'd been saving for a special occasion, and they passed it around while Martha cried happy tears and started planning a wedding feast. Pete wanted to know if he could be a groomsman, and Caleb offered to help build furniture for when they started having babies. And through it all, Haven stood at Elias's side with her hand in his, the simple gold ring catching the lamplight. Both of them, grinning like idiots who couldn't quite believe their luck. They were married 6 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the ranch, with Marshal Coughlin riding out to serve as a witness, and Carlos's cousin, who happened to be a circuit preacher, officiating. Haven wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully preserved all these years, and looked so beautiful that Elias forgot how to breathe when he saw her. The ceremony was short and sweet, the traditional vows exchanged with voices that only shook a little. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, and told Elias he could kiss his bride, the cheer that went up from the assembled guests, ranch hands, neighbors, friends from town, was loud enough to spook the horses in the corral. The party that followed lasted well into the night with music and dancing and more food than seemed possible. Elias danced with his new wife under the stars, holding her close while the fiddle played and their friends celebrated around them. "Happy?" Haven asked, her head on his shoulder. "Happier than I knew I could be," Elias admitted. "I keep thinking I'm going to wake up and find out this is all a dream." "Not a dream, just life. Our life." She pulled back to look at him, and her smile was radiant. "We did it, Elias. We built something real." "Yeah, we did." He kissed her softly, not caring that everyone was watching, "and we're just getting started." The months that followed were busy and full, the ranch demanding constant attention as they expanded operations and started working the silver mine properly. The mine turned out to be even richer than they'd hoped, and the income from it allowed them to hire more hands, buy better equipment, and make improvements they'd only dreamed of before. But more than the prosperity, more than the success of the ranch, it was the small daily moments that made Elias grateful he'd stayed. Waking up next to Haven every morning, working side by side in the honest labor that made muscles ache and hearts full. Evenings spent with their extended ranch family, sharing meals and stories and laughter. He'd spent so many years alone, so many years running, that he'd forgotten what it felt like to belong, to be part of something bigger than himself, to have people who depended on him and people he could depend on in return. Winter came, unusually harsh that year, with snow that actually stuck to the ground for days at a time. They lost a few head of cattle to the cold, but nothing catastrophic. The hands grumbled about the weather, but secretly seemed to enjoy having an excuse to spend more time indoors, playing cards and telling stories around the fire. And on a particularly cold January morning, Haven woke Elias with news that would change everything again. "I'm pregnant," she said simply, her hand on her still flat stomach and wonder in her eyes. Elias sat up so fast he nearly fell out of bed. We're going to have a baby around August, the doctor thinks." She was smiling through tears, and when he pulled her into his arms, she laughed shakily. "I know we said we'd wait a year or two, but apparently our baby had other ideas." "A baby?" Elias pressed his hand over hers on her stomach, marveling. "Our baby. Are you happy? I know this is fast, and we're still getting settled, and the ranch needs so much work." "I'm ecstatic." Terrified, but ecstatic. He kissed her deeply, tasting salt from her tears. "A baby. God. Haven, we're going to be parents. Good parents, I hope. Though I have no idea what I'm doing." "Neither do I. But we'll figure it out together, same as everything else." Elias pulled her back down onto the bed, holding her close. "We're going to be a family, a real family." They told the others at breakfast, and the celebration rivaled their wedding. Martha immediately started planning nursery furniture and baby clothes. Carlos offered to build a cradle, same as he'd built for his own children. Matteo got misty-eyed and had to excuse himself, overcome with emotion at the thought of new life coming to the ranch he'd helped build. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through winter and into spring. Haven bloomed with it, her joy and health making her even more beautiful despite the discomforts. Elias found himself constantly worried, checking on her, making sure she wasn't working too hard, driving her slightly crazy with his overprotectiveness. "I'm pregnant, not made of glass," she told him after he'd insisted on carrying a bucket that she'd been carrying just fine for months. "Women have been doing this since the beginning of time. I'm not going to break. I know. I can't lose you, Haven. You and this baby. You're everything to me now." Her expression softened, and she took his hand and placed it on her swollen belly. "Feel that? That's your son or daughter, kicking, strong and healthy, and ready to join our crazy life. We're all going to be fine, Elias. Stop worrying." He tried, but worry was a hard habit to break for a man who'd lost so much. So he channeled it into preparation instead, building a nursery, crafting furniture with his own hands, preparing the ranch and their lives for the new addition. Summer came fierce and hot, and Haven grew large and uncomfortable, but refused to slow down until Elias and Martha practically forced her to rest. She spent the last few weeks of her pregnancy on the porch, directing operations from her rocking chair with the imperious air of a general commanding troops. "I feel useless," she complained one afternoon in late July. "You're growing our child," Elias reminded her, bringing her cool water. "That's the opposite of useless. I'm fat and hot, and my feet are swollen, and I can't remember the last time I saw my own toes." But she was smiling as she said it, one hand rubbing her belly in the unconscious gesture he'd come to love. "I'll be glad when this baby decides to make an appearance. Doctor said any day now. The doctor's been saying that for 2 weeks." Haven shifted uncomfortably. "I swear this child is as stubborn as." She stopped, her eyes going wide. "Oh, oh, oh, what? Haven, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. I think my water just broke." She looked up at him, excitement and fear wearing in her expression. "Elias, it's time." The next 12 hours were the longest and most terrifying of Elias's life. Martha and the doctor they'd had staying at the ranch for the past week took over, banishing him from the bedroom where Haven labored. He paced in the parlor, wearing a track in the floor, while the sounds from upstairs made his heart clench with worry. Matteo sat with him, offering whiskey and quiet reassurance. "Women are stronger than we give them credit for, Miss Haven most of all. She'll be fine." "How can you be sure?" "Because she's a lock and locks don't give up. Not on anything. Especially not on bringing life into this world." Matteo poured them both another drink. "Your job now is to trust her and wait, neither of which you're very good at, but you'll manage." As the sun set and rose again, painting the sky in shades of fire, a new sound joined the symphony from upstairs, the thin, outraged wail of a newborn baby. Elias was on his feet and moving before he realized it, taking the stairs 2 at a time. Martha met him at the bedroom door, her face exhausted but glowing. "You have a daughter," she said simply, "a beautiful, perfect daughter. And Haven's asking for you." He pushed past her into the room, and there was Haven, tired and sweaty and more beautiful than he'd ever seen her, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a white blanket. She looked up when he entered, and her smile could have lit the entire desert. "Come meet your daughter," she said softly. Elias approached the bed like he was walking on holy ground, his heart so full it hurt. Haven shifted the bundle so he could see the tiny face, red and wrinkled and absolutely perfect, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that were trying to focus on this new, overwhelming world. She's words failed him completely. "She's ours." Haven placed the baby in his arms, guiding him on how to support the head. And Elias looked down at his daughter and felt his entire world shift and realign around this tiny person. "I was thinking we could name her Sarah, after my mother. Sarah Rose Crowley. It's perfect. She's perfect." He couldn't stop staring, couldn't believe that he, a drifter, a man who'd spent decades running from connection, was now holding his own child. "Hello, Sarah. I'm your father, and I promise you right now that I'm going to spend every day of the rest of my life making sure you know how loved you are." The baby made a small sound, her tiny hand waving, and when Elias offered his finger, she gripped it with surprising strength. That grip went straight to his heart, a bond forming in that instant that he knew would never break. Haven watched them, with tears streaming down her face, happy tears this time. "Look at you, natural father, already. I'm terrified I'm going to break her." "You won't. You're going to be wonderful." She reached out and took his free hand. "We both are. Together. Together." It was a word that had once terrified him, representing commitment and vulnerability and all the things he'd spent his life avoiding. But now, standing in that sunlit bedroom with his wife and his newborn daughter together, felt like the most beautiful word in any language. He'd been lost once, dying in the desert with nothing but regrets and loneliness. But Haven had found him, saved him, loved him back to life. She'd given him a home, a purpose, a family. She'd given him everything. And as he looked from his daughter's tiny face to his wife's exhausted, joyful expression, Elias Crowley finally understood what it meant to be found, to be home, to be complete. The first few weeks with Sarah were a blur of sleepless nights, an overwhelming joy that left both Elias and Haven stumbling through their days like happy drunkards. The baby had powerful lungs and strong opinions about when she wanted to eat, which seemed to be constantly. But every time Elias held her tiny body against his chest, felt her heartbeat fluttering like a bird's wing, he marveled that something so small could contain so much love. Martha became an invaluable presence, teaching them both how to swaddle and burp and interpret the different types of cries. "This one's hungry, this one's tired, and this one just wants attention," she'd explained patiently, while Sarah wailed her displeasure at some infant injustice. "You'll learn the difference soon enough." And they did learn, though not without mistakes and moments of panic. The first time Sarah ran a slight fever, Elias rode to town at a gallop to fetch the doctor, only to be told it was normal teething. When she wouldn't stop crying one entire night, they discovered she just wanted to be held while someone walked in circles around the parlor. And Elias wore a path in the floor doing exactly that until dawn. But slowly, impossibly, they found their rhythm as parents. Haven would nurse Sarah, while Elias read to them both from whatever book was handy. He'd change diapers while singing the old trail songs his grandfather had taught him, making Haven laugh at his terrible voice. They'd take turns walking the floor at night, passing each other in the hallway with exhausted smiles and whispered encouragements. "We're doing all right, aren't we?" Haven asked one evening when Sarah had finally fallen asleep and they'd collapsed into bed. Bone-tired, but content. "Better than all right? We're doing great." Elias pulled her close, and she nestled against him with a sigh. "Though, I'll never complain about a full night's sleep again." "Liar, you'll be complaining within a week of getting one." "Probably." He kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her hair mixed with baby soap and the faint smell of milk that seemed to permeate everything now. "But I wouldn't trade this for anything. Not for all the sleep in the world." As summer faded into fall and Sarah grew from a helpless newborn into an infant who could smile and grab and make cooing sounds that melted everyone's hearts, the ranch continued to thrive. The silver mine was producing steady income, enough that they'd been able to hire 3 more hands and expand their cattle operations significantly. The herd had grown to over 800 head, making them one of the larger ranches in the territory. But success brought its own challenges. Other ranchers were starting to eye their water rights with interest, and there were rumors of a railroad spur being built that could either make their fortune or destroy their way of life, depending on where the tracks ended up. Elias found himself spending more time in town, attending meetings with other ranchers and business owners, navigating the political landscape that he'd once avoided. "Never thought I'd see the day when Elias Crowley became a respectable businessman," Mateo said with amusement one afternoon as Elias prepared to ride to yet another meeting. "Neither did I, but turns out having a wife and daughter makes a man care about things like property taxes and water rights legislation." Elias adjusted his hat, still not quite comfortable in the suit Haven had insisted he buy. Who knew responsibility could be so boring? "And yet you keep showing up to these meetings because if I don't, someone else will make decisions that affect my family's future. Can't let that happen." He swung into his saddle, the horse dancing impatiently. Besides, turns out I'm pretty good at talking people around to my way of thinking when I'm not trying to arrest them. The meeting that day was contentious, with arguments breaking out over proposed changes to territorial water law. A consortium of mining interests wanted to alter the existing regulations to give them priority access to streams and springs, which would devastate the ranchers who depended on that same water for their herds. Elias stood and argued passionately against the change, citing not just economics, but conservation and the rights of settlers who'd been working the land for decades. He won the argument, though not without making a few enemies among the mining interests. As he left the meeting hall, a well-dressed man he didn't recognize approached him with an outstretched hand. "Mr. Crowley, I'm Thomas Ashford with the Territorial Land Commission." "That was quite a speech you gave in there." Elias shook his hand wearily, suspicious of official-sounding titles. "Just speaking the truth as I see it." "Well, your truth is backed by solid legal reasoning and practical experience. We need more men like you in territorial government." Ashford pulled out a card and handed it over. "The governor is looking for someone to serve on the new Water Rights Board. It's a paid position, and it would give you a real voice in shaping policy for the whole territory. Would you be interested?" Elias stared at the card, feeling like he'd stepped into someone else's life. Him on a territorial board, making policy that would affect thousands of people. The old Elias would have laughed at the absurdity and ridden away. But the new Elias, the husband and father and ranch owner, saw the opportunity. "Can I think about it?" he asked. "Of course. Talk it over with your wife, but don't take too long. The governor wants to make appointments by the end of the month." Ashford tipped his hat. "I hope you'll accept, Mr. Crowley. The territory needs honest men in positions of influence." Elias rode home in a daze, turning the offer over in his mind. It meant more time away from the ranch, more politics and bureaucracy, and all the things he'd once despised about civilization. But it also meant protecting not just his own interests, but those of every small rancher and settler trying to build a life in this hard country. He found Haven on the porch with Sarah, who was now 5 months old and starting to babble in proto-language that her mother swore would be actual words any day now. Haven looked up as he dismounted, and her smile dimmed slightly when she saw his expression. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong exactly. He sat down heavily in the chair beside her. "I got offered a position on the Territorial Water Rights Board. It's a government appointment paid, but it would mean a lot of time in the capital and away from here." Haven was quiet for a moment, bouncing Sarah gently on her knee. The baby grabbed at her mother's hair, giggling. "What do you want to do?" "I don't know. Part of me thinks it's crazy that I have no business trying to make policy when I've spent most of my life running from responsibility. But another part thinks this is exactly what I should be doing, using my experience to help people, to make sure the mistakes and corruption I saw in other places don't happen here." "You'd be good at it," Haven said thoughtfully. "You're smart and fair, and you understand both the law and the practical realities of ranching, and God knows we need people like that in government instead of the corrupt idiots who usually end up there. But it would mean being gone a lot, missing time with you and Sarah. It would. And I won't pretend that doesn't matter." "But Elias," Haven reached over and took his hand, "you stayed here because you wanted to, not because you had to. You built a life with me because you chose to, not because you felt trapped. This board position, if you take it because you believe it's important work. Don't turn it down just because you're afraid of being away from us." "I'm not afraid of being away. I'm afraid of missing things. Sarah's first words, her first steps, important moments I can't get back. You'll miss some moments, but you'll be here for plenty more. And our daughter will grow up knowing her father is a man who stands up for what's right, who uses his voice to help people." Haven shifted Sarah to her other knee. "That's not a bad legacy to leave her." Sarah chose that moment to look directly at Elias and say clear as day, "Da." Both parents froze, staring at the baby in shock. "Did she just?" Haven started. "She said da. She said da." Elias scooped his daughter out of Haven's arms and lifted her high, making her squeal with delight. "That's right, Sarah Rose. I'm da. Say it again, sweetheart." "Da da da da." Sarah grabbed his nose with her chubby hand, laughing at her own cleverness. Elias felt tears sting his eyes, overwhelmed by the simple perfection of the moment. His daughter's first word, and he was here for it, would remember it for the rest of his life. This was what he'd been afraid of missing, these everyday miracles that made up a life. But Haven was right. He couldn't let fear keep him from doing important work. He'd spent too many years letting fear make his decisions. "I'm going to take the position," he said, still holding Sarah high. "I'll make it work. I'll schedule my time in the capital around the ranch work, and when I have to be gone, I'll come home every chance I get. But this is important, and I think I can do some good." Haven stood and wrapped her arms around both of them. And for a moment, they just stood there as a family, complete and whole. "Then you take it, and you do that good. We'll be right here waiting when you come home." Elias accepted the position the next week, and his life took on a new dimension of complexity and purpose. He spent 1 week out of every month in the territorial capital, attending board meetings and working sessions, hammering out policy that would govern water usage across Nevada. The work was tedious sometimes, infuriating others, but deeply satisfying in a way he hadn't anticipated. He was making a difference, real tangible change that protected small ranchers from being squeezed out by larger interests, that ensured water was allocated fairly, that prevented the kind of corruption and abuse he'd seen destroy communities in other territories. And when mining companies or wealthy landowners tried to bully the board into giving them preferential treatment, Elias stood his ground with a quiet determination that reminded everyone why he'd been chosen. "You've made quite a name for yourself," Marshal Coughlin told him during one of his visits to the capital. The old lawman had aged in the past year, his hair whiter and his movement slower, but his eyes were still sharp. "They're calling you the cowboy's conscience in the newspapers." "That's ridiculous," Elias muttered, though he was secretly pleased. "It's accurate. You've single-handedly blocked 3 attempts to gut the water rights protections, and you've made enemies of some very powerful men in the process." Coughlin's expression grew serious. "Watch your back, son. Rich men don't like being told no, and they have long memories. Let them remember I'm not backing down just because it's inconvenient for someone's profit margin." "I know. That's what worries me. Just be careful. You've got a family now. Don't let your principles get them hurt." Elias took the warning to heart, varying his routes home and staying alert for trouble. But months passed without incident, and gradually he relaxed into his dual life, respected board member in the capital, husband and father on the ranch. Sarah grew and changed with astonishing speed, transforming from a baby into a toddler who walked and talked and got into everything. Her personality emerged strong and stubborn with her mother's determination and her father's quiet intensity. She loved the horses, spending hours watching Carlos work in the corral, and she had a special bond with Mateo, who treated her like the granddaughter he'd never had. "She's going to be a handful when she gets older," Haven predicted one evening as they watched Sarah toddle around the parlor, investigating everything with fearless curiosity. "She already is a handful," Elias replied, scooping up his daughter before she could pull a book off the shelf and probably eat it. "But she's our handful. Duh." "Book," Sarah demanded, pointing imperiously at the shelf. "All right, all right. We'll read a book." He settled into his chair with Sarah on his lap and pulled down a volume of poetry. "How about this one?" "That's Walt Whitman," Haven said with amusement. "She's 18 months old, Elias. She's not going to understand transcendental poetry. She doesn't have to understand it. She just has to hear the rhythm of the language, learn to love words and stories." He opened the book and began reading, and Sarah settled against his chest with a contented sigh, her eyes fixed on the pages as if she could will herself to understand the mysterious symbols there. These were the moments Elias treasured most. The quiet evenings when the day's work was done and they could just be a family without the weight of responsibility or the complications of the outside world. Just a man, his wife, their daughter, and the simple peace of home. But peace, as Elias had learned, was always temporary. He was in the capital for a board meeting when the telegram came, delivered to the meeting hall by a breathless messenger. Elias opened it with trembling hands, some instinct telling him this was bad news. "Haven injured. Stop. Come home." "Stop, Mateo." He didn't remember leaving the meeting or how he got to the livery stable. His next clear memory was riding hard through the night, pushing his horse faster than was safe, terror clawing at his throat. The telegram had said, "Injured, not dead," but injured could mean anything from a broken arm to something far worse. Please, he prayed to whatever deity might be listening, please let her be all right. Let them both be all right. He reached the ranch at dawn, his horse lathered and exhausted. Matteo was waiting in the yard, and the relief on his face when he saw Elias was almost painful. "She's all right," he said before Elias could even dismount. "Bruised and shaken up, but all right. Sarah, too." "What happened?" "Horse spooked during a storm yesterday. Haven was riding with Sarah, and lightning struck close enough to send the horse into a panic. They went down hard. Haven managed to protect Sarah in the fall, but she took the impact herself." Matteo's expression was grim, could have been much worse. Elias ran into the house and up to their bedroom, where he found Haven in bed with Sarah curled up beside her. His wife had a spectacular bruise covering half her face, and she moved stiffly when she turned toward him, but she was alive and conscious and smiling. "You rode all night," she said, her voice rough. "I told Matteo not to scare you. You were hurt. You and Sarah." He sank onto the bed beside them, carefully gathering both of them into his arms. "Nothing could have kept me away. We're fine, just bumps and bruises. Sarah didn't even cry much. She's tougher than I am." Haven winced as she shifted position, though I might have cracked a rib or two. "Doctor says I need to rest for a few weeks. Then you'll rest. I'm not going back to the capital until you're healed. Elias, you can't just abandon your position. Watch me. You and Sarah are more important than any board meeting." He pressed his forehead to hers, breathing in the scent of her, alive and whole. "I almost lost you today, both of you. That puts everything else in perspective real fast. You didn't lose us. We're right here." Haven touched his face, her fingers gentle. "But I won't argue about you staying. I'd like to have you here while I recover. Sarah's been asking for you constantly." "Da," Sarah confirmed, patting his cheek. "Da home." "That's right, baby. Da's home, and I'm not going anywhere for a while." He spent the next 3 weeks managing both the ranch and his board duties by telegram and courier, refusing to leave, despite Haven's insistence that she was fine. He watched her like a hawk, noting every w's of pain, every slow movement, until she started throwing things at him in frustration. "I'm healing, not dying," she said after he tried to help her sit down for the 5th time in an hour. "Stop hovering." "I'm not hovering. I'm helping. You're driving me crazy. Go do ranch work or board work or anything that gets you out from under my feet for a few hours." So he threw himself into the ranch with renewed energy, working alongside the hands from dawn to dusk, exhausting himself so he could sleep without nightmares of what might have happened. And slowly, as Haven healed and regained her strength, his panic subsided into a more manageable fear. "I want to resign from the board," he told her one evening after Sarah had gone to bed. "I can't do this anymore. Being gone so much, missing things, not being here when you need me." "No," Haven's voice was firm. "You're not using my accident as an excuse to run away from important work. I'm not running, aren't you? Elias, you've spent your whole life running from things that scare you. And I get it. I really do. This scared me too. But we can't live our lives in fear of what might happen. We have to keep moving forward, keep doing the work we're meant to do. The work I'm meant to do is here with you and Sarah. Part of it is, but part of it is also in that capital, fighting for people who don't have the voice or the power to fight for themselves. You're good at that, Elias. Better than almost anyone I've ever seen. And our daughter should see her father using his gifts to make the world better, not hiding away because he's afraid." Elias was quiet for a long moment, wrestling with himself. What if something happens again and I'm not here? Then Matteo and the others will handle it same as they did this time. "We're not alone, Elias. We have people, friends, family. You don't have to carry everything yourself." She took his hand. "I'm not saying it's easy. I'm saying it's worth it. You're making a real difference in people's lives. Don't give that up because you're scared." So he didn't resign. He went back to the capital the next month, though he worked even harder to schedule his time efficiently so he could spend as many days as possible at home. He became known for his perfect attendance record and his ability to cut through bureaucratic nonsense to get things done. The newspapers wrote glowing editorials about his integrity and dedication, and there was even talk of him running for territorial legislature. Absolutely not, he told Haven when she mentioned it. Board membership is one thing, elected office is something else entirely. Why? You'd be good at it. Because politicians make promises they can't keep and compromise their principles to stay in power. I've seen it too many times. I won't become that. Not every politician is corrupt, Elias. You could be different, or I could become exactly what I despise. No, I'll serve out my term on the board, but after that, I'm done with government work. I want to focus on the ranch and our family. Haven didn't argue, but Elias could see she thought he was selling himself short. And maybe he was. But he'd found his limits, the line he wouldn't cross. He'd take on responsibility and do important work, but he wouldn't sacrifice his soul or his family for ambition. The seasons turned one into another, and Sarah grew from a toddler into a bright, curious 4-year-old who asked endless questions and had opinions about everything. She learned to ride on a gentle mare Carlos trained specifically for her, and she followed Elias around the ranch like a devoted shadow whenever he was home. "Tell me the story again," she demanded one evening as he tucked her into bed. "About how you met Mama?" It had become her favorite bedtime story, the tale of how her father had nearly died in the desert and her mother had saved him. Elias had told it dozens of times, but he never tired of seeing the wonder in Sarah's eyes as she listened. "Well," he began, settling into the chair beside her bed, "it was the hottest day of the hottest summer anyone could remember, and I was lost in the desert with no water and no hope." He told her the story, editing out the more frightening parts, but keeping the essential truth that he'd been dying, and Haven had refused to let him. That sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is help a stranger. That love sometimes starts with simple kindness and grows into something that changes everything. "And then you stayed forever?" Sarah asked when he finished. "Then I stayed forever," Elias confirmed, "because I realized that your mama and this ranch and the life we could build together was worth more than all the wandering in the world. And then I was born. And then you were born and made everything even better." He kissed her forehead. "Now go to sleep, little one. We've got an early day tomorrow. Can I help with the horses? If you promise to do exactly what Carlos tells you, I promise." Sarah snuggled down under her blankets, her eyes already drooping. "I love you, Dar. I love you too, sweetheart, more than all the stars in the sky." He watched her drift off to sleep, marveling as always at the miracle of her existence. Then he went downstairs to find Haven sitting on the porch, enjoying the cool evening air. "She asleep?" Haven asked as he sat down beside her. "Finally," after demanding the story again. "She loves that story. I think she's going to grow up to be a romantic." Haven leaned against him with a contented sigh. "Hard to believe she's already 4. Seems like just yesterday she was a tiny baby who kept us up all night. Time moves fast out here, faster than I expected." Elias wrapped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "Sometimes I can't believe it's been almost 5 years since you found me in that desert. Best decision I ever made, pulling you onto my horse. Best thing that ever happened to me. You refusing to ride past a dying man." He kissed the top of her head. "I was so lost, Haven, not just in the desert that day, but in life. I didn't know who I was or where I belonged, or if I'd ever find a place that felt like home. And now I know exactly who I am. I'm your husband, Sarah's father, a rancher and a board member, and a man who's finally stopped running long enough to build something real." He turned her to face him. "I'm home. Really, truly home. And I'll never take that for granted." Haven's eyes were bright with tears. "You're going to make me cry, and I worked hard on this makeup. Cry if you want. You're beautiful either way." He kissed her softly, tasting salt and love and the promise of all the years still ahead of them. "Thank you for saving me. Not just that day in the desert, but every day since. Thank you for staying, for choosing us." She pulled back and wiped her eyes. "Speaking of choosing us, I have some news." "What kind of news?" "The kind that involves buying more furniture for the nursery and preparing yourself for even less sleep." Haven's smile was radiant. "I'm pregnant again, Elias. About 3 months along." For a moment Elias couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Then joy exploded through him, and he let out a whoop that probably woke Sarah and half the hands in the bunkhouse. He picked Haven up and spun her around, both of them laughing like children. Another baby. We're having another baby. Careful, put me down before you drop me. But she was laughing too, her happiness matching his. I wanted to wait to tell you until I was sure. And the doctor confirmed it today. Are you happy? Is this what you want? Are you joking? I'm ecstatic. Sarah's going to be a big sister, and our family is growing, and everything I ever dreamed of when I was a girl is coming true. She kept his face in her hands. I love our life, Elias. I love you, and I can't wait to meet this new little person we've made. They spent the rest of the evening talking about names and nursery arrangements and how to tell Sarah she was going to be a big sister. And later, lying in bed with Haven curled against his side, Elias felt a peace so profound it brought tears to his eyes. This was what he'd been searching for all those years of drifting. Not adventure or freedom or escape from his past, but this belonging, purpose, love that ran deeper than fear, a family to protect, a home to build, a future that stretched out bright and full of promise. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and Sarah took the news of the coming baby with enthusiastic pride. She insisted on helping prepare the nursery, offering suggestions that ranged from helpful to completely impractical. The baby should have a pony, she announced. One afternoon, a very small pony that lives in the house. Ponies can't live in houses, Haven explained patiently, but maybe when the baby is older they can share your pony sometimes. My pony is mine, but I guess they can watch me ride. Elias finished his term on the Water Rights Board with a reputation as one of the most effective members in the board's history. The legislation he'd helped craft became a model for other territories, protecting small ranchers and ensuring fair water allocation while still allowing for responsible development. When the governor asked him to consider another term, he declined politely but firmly. I've done what I can do there, he told Haven. Now I want to focus on what we're building here, the ranch, our family, our life. No regrets? Not a single one? Well, maybe one. I regret not finding you sooner, but I guess I had to wander all those years to end up exactly where I needed to be. Their second child arrived on a crisp October morning, coming faster than Sarah had, and with far less drama. Haven labored for only 6 hours before delivering a healthy baby boy, with his father's dark hair and his mother's determined chin. Meet your son, Martha said, placing the baby in Elias's arms, another perfect Crowley. Elias looked down at his son and felt his heart expand to accommodate this new love. Hello, little man. I'm your da, and your big sister Sarah is going to spoil you rotten. They named him Daniel Thomas Crowley, after Haven's father and Elias's long-dead grandfather. Sarah was permitted to visit the baby, and she approached with the careful reverence of a 4-year-old who'd been told the new arrival was fragile. He's so small, she whispered, touching Daniel's tiny hand with one finger. Was I that small? You were, Elias confirmed, and you grew big and strong just like he will. I'll protect him, Sarah declared solemnly. I'll be the best big sister ever. And she was. As Daniel grew from infant to baby to toddler, Sarah appointed herself his guardian and teacher, showing him everything from how to pet the barn cats to where the best hiding spots were in the house. The two of them became inseparable, and watching them together filled Elias with a contentment he'd never imagined possible. The ranch continued to prosper. The silver mine eventually played out. But by then they diversified enough that it didn't matter. They'd bought adjacent parcels of land, expanded the herd, started breeding horses that were sought after throughout the territory. The Crowley Lock Ranch became known as one of the best-run operations in Nevada, a model of sustainable ranching and fair labor practices. Marshall Coughlin retired and moved to California to live with his daughter, but he wrote occasionally. His letters full of news about the changing West and gentle teasing about Elias, having become respectable. Mateo's knees finally gave out entirely when he was 72, and he transitioned from working foreman to advisory role, spending his days on the porch offering wisdom and telling stories to anyone who would listen. Young Pete, not so young anymore at 35, took over as foreman and proved himself more than capable. Martha and Carlos celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary with a party that brought together ranchers, townspeople, and friends from across the territory. Their children and grandchildren came from as far as Denver and San Francisco, filling the ranch with noise and laughter and love. And through it all, Elias and Haven built their life together, day by ordinary day, moment by precious moment. They had arguments and make-ups, struggles and triumphs. Bad years and good years. They raised their children with firm love and high expectations, teaching them to work hard, treat people fairly, and stand up for what was right. Sarah grew into a capable young woman who could ride and rope as well as any man on the ranch, with her mother's business sense and her father's quiet integrity. At 16, she announced her intention to attend college back east to study law so she could fight for people the way her father had. "You sure about this?" Elias asked, his heart breaking at the thought of her leaving even as he swelled with pride. "It's a long way from home." "I'm sure, but I'll come back, Da. This will always be home. I just need to go learn how to make a bigger difference in the world." She hugged him tight. "You taught me that some things are worth fighting for. Now I want to learn how to fight better." Daniel, quieter and more introspective than his sister, showed a gift for working with horses that reminded everyone of Carlos. By the time he was 14, he could gentle the wildest colt and had an intuitive understanding of equine behavior that couldn't be taught. He had no interest in leaving the ranch, declaring that everything he wanted was right here. "That's all right," Haven told him. "The ranch will need someone to run it someday. Someone who loves it the way we do. Maybe that someone is you." One evening in late autumn, almost 20 years to the day since Haven had found him dying in the desert, Elias sat on the porch, watching the sun set over the land they'd built together. His hair was graying now, and his body carried the aches and pains of hard years, but he felt rich beyond measure. Haven emerged from the house and settled into the chair beside him, their hands finding each other automatically after decades of practice. "Sarah sent a letter," she said. "She made law review at Harvard, top of her class." "Of course she did. She's a lock. You people don't know how to do anything halfway." "She's a Crowley too, stubborn as the day is long, just like her father." Haven squeezed his hand. "She says she's coming home for Christmas, and she's bringing someone she wants us to meet." "A someone." That was my interpretation. "A young man from Boston, apparently from a very good family." Elias felt a pang at the thought of his little girl grown enough to bring young men home to meet her parents. But that was life, wasn't it? Watching your children grow and fly away, hoping you'd given them strong enough wings. "We'll set an extra place at Christmas dinner," he said. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the light fade and the stars emerge. Daniel was in the barn with Carlos, working with a new colt. Somewhere in the distance, they could hear the lowing of cattle and the eternal whisper of the desert wind. "Do you ever think about that day?" Haven asked quietly. "The day I found you." "Every single day of my life." Elias brought her hand to his lips and kissed it. "I think about how close I came to dying out there. How different everything would be if you'd taken a different route that morning. And I thank God or fate or whatever force in the universe led you to me. I think about it too, about how that hunch to ride south saved both our lives, yours literally, mine in every way that matters. I was so alone, Elias, so scared and tired and ready to give up. Then you showed up, this stubborn man who refused to quit even when he should have, and you reminded me what it meant to fight. We saved each other." "Yeah, we did." Haven leaned her head on his shoulder. "And we built something beautiful from that saving. Look at this place, Elias. Look at what we've created. The ranch, our children, the lives we've touched. It's more than I ever dreamed possible." "It's everything," Elias agreed. "Everything I never knew I wanted, and more than I deserved. You deserve it all. You deserve happiness and peace and a family that loves you. You always did. You just didn't believe it until I forced you to. Lucky for me, you're persistent. Lucky for both of us." They watched the last light fade from the sky, the desert settling into its nighttime rhythms. And Elias thought about the journey that had brought him here, all the wrong turns and hard lessons, the losses and the loneliness, the years of running from himself and his past. It had all led to this moment, this porch, this woman, this life. He'd been lost once, dying in the desert with nothing but regrets. But Haven had found him, saved him, loved him back to life. She'd given him a home when he'd forgotten what home felt like. She'd given him a family when he thought he'd always be alone. She'd given him a future when he'd been certain he had none. And in return, he'd given her everything he had. His loyalty, his love, his whole heart. He'd fought beside her, built beside her, grown beside her. He'd learned what it meant to stay, to commit, to put down roots so deep they could weather any storm. "Thank you," he said suddenly. "For what?" "For not riding past me that day. For pouring water on my lips and telling me to stay with you. For seeing something worth saving in a half-dead drifter." He turned to face her, and even in the darkness, he could see her eyes shining. "Thank you for giving me a reason to stop running, for showing me what it means to be home." Haven's smile was tremulous, beautiful. "Thank you for staying, for choosing me, choosing us, choosing this life every single day. You didn't have to, but you did, and that's made all the difference." They kissed soft and sweet, a kiss that held 20 years of love and partnership and shared dreams. When they pulled apart, both were smiling through tears. "Come on," Haven said, standing and pulling him to his feet. "Daniel will be finishing up in the barn soon, and we should have dinner ready. Tomorrow morning comes early. It always does on a ranch." They walked inside together, hand in hand, ready for whatever tomorrow would bring. Behind them, the desert night sang its ancient song of endurance and survival, of beauty and harshness, of the eternal cycle of endings and beginnings. Elias Crowley had come to this land lost and dying, certain his story was over. But Haven Locke had shown him that sometimes the end of one story is just the beginning of another. That sometimes being saved means learning to save yourself. That sometimes the greatest adventure is not in running away, but in standing still and building something that lasts. He'd been a drifter, a lawman, a fighter, a survivor, but now, finally, he was simply a man, a husband, a father, a rancher, a friend. And that simple life, that ordinary existence filled with extraordinary love, was more than enough. It was everything. And as the stars wheeled overhead and the desert wind whispered its eternal secrets, Elias Crowley smiled and stepped into his home, grateful beyond words for the day a woman with creek-water eyes had refused to let him die and had instead given him a reason to truly live.